Good morning, everybody. How is it going? I am this. Put that down there. Up Sparky, King Cheese. Who's ready? Well, we're gonna start off. We're not ready. I'm ready. I'm not ready. I'm ready. I'm not ready. Well, let us start off with the first one, which is Canaan's story. Look at that hair. Cute. Alfard al-Shua. The solitary serpent. The snake has lost 8 of its 9 heads. In the Middle East, the snake is seen as an ill omen, and those who take it as their name are said to be both wicked and extremely cunning. Also got some other things to talk about today, hopefully, too. If I give in to sentimentality, I will have lost my light all over again. Ooh, this is all anime style. I thought there was going to be some live action stuff, but no. The blue sun rose into the sky. As the girl rushed to the airport, she was met with the intense light of a summery day. April 28th, 8:21 a.m., Singapore, Shanghai Airport. She let out a weary breath. A shaft of sunlight blazed across her face, and she squinted her eyes against the glare. The night had been a long one. She could feel exhaustion taking hold. She wanted to stop and sink into one of the sofas in the airport lounge, but she didn't have time for that now. What up, honey? How's it going? Was that all just a diversion? Who the hell does she think she is, just tossing people away like that? Were the fringe groups of her own organization nothing more than halva to her? Also known by other names including halawa and halaweh, a popular confection throughout the Arab world, typically made with ingredients such as sesame, apricots, or grains kneaded together with sugar. It is a type of oil or fat. It is said to have originated in ancient Mesopotamia. Muttering curses that seemed at odds with her young face, the girl wove her way gracefully through the sea of travelers. Time was of the essence. All she had in her hidden back pocket were some dollar bills. The dollar is a unit of currency in several countries, including Canada and Australia, but here it refers to the United States dollar, controlled by the Federal Reserve Bank. At the time of the story, it is frequently used alongside the euro as a standard currency for international transactions. She was just going to have to acquire the gear she needed on site. It galled her to be so under-equipped. The only consolation was that at least she had been able to arrange for a boarding pass in time. Al-Anasa? Canaan refocused her instantly as an unfamiliar man addressed her in Arabic. Was he a thief or someone more dangerous third party? This was a country where both one's money and one's life could easily be at risk. She had one way to find out what kind of threat she was dealing with. Which gate is the flight to Japan? Her voice was sweet and girlishly soft. The man gasped. He hadn't been expecting this. The hen told him what he was really in for. This girl was the natural enemy of the Serpent, a steely soldier in the proxy war. A professional freelancer who took any requests and who always carried out her mission. A mere hour earlier, she'd taken out an armed syndicate 30 members strong, the red flowers of blood left in her wake of a testament to her rumored capabilities. The man was dumbstruck. What kind of twisted fairy tale was this, with mercenaries who looked like a sweet little girls? What's wrong? Were you not not able to make the arrangements? No, everything's fine, he said hurriedly. The flight is departing from gate 6, if you're looking for your passenger ticket. They're in my right pocket. That was impressive. I didn't notice until you've already handed them off. The man gasped again. His surprise shifted to caution. With all the bystanders around, it should have been easy enough to make a handoff without even the recipient ever noticing. He was proud of his skills, but she'd still seen right through him. Don't feel bad. At least I didn't spot you in advance. You're the man I spoke to on the phone outside, right? Canaan asked. Man, this being voice acted is so weird. That was quite the feat. I don't offer praise like this lightly, but I'm legitimately impressed. She'd known since the moment I arrived, he thought, and she hadn't figured it out from his appearance. She just intuited it somehow. She had also immediately sensed that he was ashamed, even though he kept his face a perfect blank. Nicely done. I see why they called you the natural enemy of the serpent. That seems a little premature, seeing as I haven't killed it yet. First, the girl had acted deliberately blasé. Now she was being downright cynical. She's a little unstable, and totally adorable. He had to remind himself that this was her. How many soldiers must she have killed? How many battlefields had she survived? Hers was the life of a professional assassin. The fact that she had retained apparent normalcy in the midst of such disorder was more than a little unsettling. Gosh, my hair is just like poofed. Also, at least she's adorable. The man was astonished that this was the famed rival of the serpent. One did not strike at the snake without exceptional cunning and skill. Hers with the perfect camouflage, a mercenary in the guise of a child. Well, so long as we're on the same page. Did you look into that story I asked you about? Yes, I was able to confirm it. The director of Okoshi Pharmaceutical, Osawa, his daughter has indeed been kidnapped. We should consider the increase in cell activity on our end to be the mere diversion. So in order to avoid being compromised, anti-government organizations that carry out illegal activities, as well as terrorist groups, frequently organize themselves into smaller subgroups in their cells. Typically only the leader of each cell knows how to contact the upper echelons. Thus, rank-and-file members who are exposed and arrested are incapable of leaking information about the larger organization to outsiders. The name cell is taken from the biological structure. Oh, Cheese Lord, how's it going? Canaan gritted her teeth. Her latest mission, concluded just an hour ago, had been to meet with this armed group, the Serpent. That was fine. Everything had gone off splendidly without a hitch. The job had been even easier than she'd imagined. There was no cause to get bent out of shape. That's a lot of blood. But the info she'd gotten her hands on had done quite a number on her mood. The Serpent herself is on the move. Japan, Shibuya, Okoshi Pharmaceutical, possible CIA involvement, presumed large-scale urban terrorism at work. The message had lifted the veil from her eyes. At long last, Alfred herself was out in the open, the head of the snake exposed. What a perfect opportunity to cut it off. But of all places to set the stage, Japan? CIA involvement could pose a problem. She wouldn't be surprised if the Serpent had already coiled itself around the Americans. When it came to the Serpent, not even the US government could be trusted to keep itself free of influence. And the target was Okoshi Pharmaceutical. If that wasn't a sign, she didn't know what was. Was that just a coincidence? No, Allah was all-powerful. Yet the girl frowned in disappointment. What need would he have to go so far to pen such a perfect tale? She had thought such great acts of fate were a relic of the distant past. Dang, they're bringing religion into this game? Okay. But she could sense it at hand in these events. She hurried to get the intel confirmed at once, and had quickly arranged a flight to Japan. Maybe she was a freelancer, not aligned with any particular organization, but she still had connections. She had many tools in her arsenal. People were often the most convenient. If they excelled at what they did, so much the better. Many individuals sought to curry her favor. Sympathizers like the man who made the handoff here, who would intervene on her behalf. Groups or individual activists who favor a particular political organization or ideology, and who demonstrates support without directly participating in the faction's activities. Thank you, she said. Is there anything else you need to tell me before I go? Abakia has been arranged to act as your representative on site. apparently he's put together a way to get you to Shibuya. After you've landed, drop out of the hold. You'll be able to head off directly from the runway, the man said.
無駄足にならないよう祈っているとも。思いのほか、ラフィーク・カナンは我らのアニールから高い信頼と敬愛を受けている。
I pray this will not be a fool's errand for your sake. I admit surprise that our Emir holds such respect and fondness for you, Rafik Canaan.
最悪、痛み分けでいいそうだ。
He hopes that you will not fail, of course, but should you do, that you will at least go down fighting. She sighed. Go down fighting? So it's okay to die as long as I take the target down with me? The man thought of nothing but his honor, his pride. No reconciliation, no negotiation, no submission. 3 tenets that mattered more than preventing bloodshed. Whatever designs these two organizations had on each other were of no concern to her. But even so, I don't need the warning. I have no intention of dying a 3rd time. A 3rd time? How many times this girl has died twice? How the hell has that happened? For once, her client's wishes aligned perfectly with her own. Her flaxen hair trailed behind her as she went to board her plane. She didn't look back. How has she died 2 other times? The flight from Singapore to Japan was roughly 7 hours. The serpent had surely anticipated that her enemy would pursue her there. In all likelihood, there would be a minimal window between Canaan's arrival in Japan and the serpent's plan coming to fruition. She really does love sinking to new lows. The serpent wouldn't be so clumsy as to let someone from back home in the Middle East, especially a foe like Canaan, find out about this by accident. If she let the plane leak, that meant that it suited her purposes somehow. It would seem she wanted to entice Canaan to risk hope before trampling her underfoot. You won't lay a finger on me. The voice sneered at her, a backstage murmur in her mind. She dealt with the enemy's diversion, learned of the plan just in the nick of time, and rushed off to Japan without a second's hesitation. Japan was where it would all be decided. If she didn't do battle with the serpent, she would lose yet another close friend. Had the serpent engineered the situation simply to torment her? But things aren't going to be how you think this time. Shibuya is a poor fit for you. She spoke to herself to calm her gnawing impatience. The time it took to write Shibuya and the time it took to write Alphard were nearly the same, but the youthful and complex nature of the city of Shibuya won out. Her instincts were something akin to fortune-telling, a tendency to reimagine the world around her in a way that was neither wishful thinking nor sour grapes. She had a sense of conviction that hovered near the truth, but she knew she couldn't let herself be optimistic. The serpent possessed a powerful venom. It was possible that, even if Alphard's plan were foiled, the life Canaan hoped to save would still be lost. There truly was no time to spare. Crushing the fringe group in Singapore had gone more quickly than she anticipated. She planned on obliterating them at the break of dawn, but she had been struck by a sudden, familiar sense of urgency and had acted an hour ahead of schedule. That change of plans had led to this. She had obtained the intel just slightly earlier than Alphard might have anticipated, and had put speed above all else in arranging the trip to Japan. Right now, she could only hope that the single hour she bought herself would let her save her friend's life. Maria. A warm red flooded her mind. They met 2 years ago. She remembered the day as an ordinary one, an unassuming tourist who was getting hassled by the same sort of guys that caused trouble all over the world. Cannon's stash of her favorite snack had just run out, and it left her in an irritable mood. Maybe that was why she stopped at the sight of the scuffle. Not that she had any interest in helping. The men just gave off an eyesore of color, their scent was far too noisy, and she wanted to be rid of them. Shukran Jazil, said the grateful tourist, her hand outstretched. She asked if Canaan would be her guide, which Canaan tried to ignore, but the young woman persisted. This girl was a person raised in peace, from a peaceful country. Canaan wasn't the kind to hold that against her, or rail against the unfairness of the world. It didn't mean she wanted to put up with it, either. A Yabinyan, like her, was practically a different species. How could they even understand each other? Canaan was closer to an animal herself, and respectable people didn't get close to animals that were still untamed. Humans had overcome their feral side. They had become creatures of intellect. When such intellect was fostered over the years, the benefits were clear. And yet... Let's be friends, Sadiki. How about it? This tourist approached her, oblivious. Kenny could recall the warm color from that moment. It still triggered her memories. It was a pleasant color, one that she had been touched by before. This tourist, Maria, was not so remarkable as to draw the eye. Nothing about her seemed especially worthy of admiration. There was just something special about the wholesome smile she offered to the dangerous creature she should never have approached. I don't know, King Cheese. I have no idea. You're very spontaneous, aren't you? Canaan smiled. There was something powerful about people who couldn't get a read on their own situation. It was the first time she smiled earnestly in a long while. The first time since she lost her light a second time. You're gonna find out how she's died twice? It's a long flight, after all. It would still be several hours before the plane landed in Japan. She did her best to ease her inner intention to let herself rest in preparation for combat. Her orders were simple: save her friend, capture the serpent. The objective was the same as it had been before, that summer 4 years ago when she'd gotten the tattoo on her left arm. That very long day when she'd been reborn as the Canaan she was now. Okay, cool. Yeah, we have a kind of ship. Canaan and Cross Maria. Save. They're on a train now. Alright, this must be 4 years in the past, I think. Maybe not. New music. Alright, okay. The rumbling of a diesel engine sounded in her ears. The color that went from with the sound indicated that the engine was running well. The interior of the compartment was rife with the smell of ramal, of sand. The dangerous blue, a gentle red, a painful yellow. Those, the colors of the many people aboard the train as it chugged along. The train had set out for Al-Haditha, northwest of Baghdad, and after a journey of 300 kilometers, it was approaching the Jordan border. At the front of the train was an antique diesel locomotive. This was followed by first-class carriages, coach-class carriages, and also several of the woman-only carriages unique to the Middle East. It was a long train, though not exceptionally so. In some Islamic countries, where men and women are prohibited from sitting together for religious reasons, women-only train cars are common. Depending on the country, the sexual segregation may be so strict as to apply even to children. Sometimes even young boys must separate from their mothers in order to ride in the men-only carriages. Interesting. It was remarkable that there was a line running between Iraq and Jordan. Traffic between the two countries, especially via railway, had been drastically reduced as a result of war. Many of the lines had long since fallen into disuse. But now that the West was working towards reconstruction of stabilization of Iraq, Japan had also planned a railway between Iraq and Jordan and had laid down a temporary rail line. The train's final stop was not the border, but 300 kilometers beyond it, in Amman, the Jordanian capital. This trip would be a turning point. Sundown would see the venerable old train service come to an end. The compartment where Canaan rode was boisterous with noise and human energy. Wind and the sound of chugging wheels rushed in together through windows with no glass. As the only rail service currently linking Iraq and Jordan, the new line drew passengers from all walks of life. A freelance journalist returning from Baghdad, an Indian peddler carrying a piece of luggage larger than himself, a group of women who appeared to be members of some Scandinavian NGO. No one seemed bothered by the clamor. The passengers shouted and prattled on as they pleased. Various sounds, miscellaneous colors, profuse scents, myriad textures, manifold flavors. All of these sensations mixed together as if a stew pot, and Canaan gulped them down. Dang, she's like a human, sensor. She's just like, yep, I got senses everywhere. I know who everyone is. I know what you're thinking. Stop thinking those thoughts. If the stimulation they provided was weak, it was like lamb without enough salt, and so that she reached into her pocket for a dose of her favorite pick-me-up, crunching it between her teeth. Is that a cigarette? Canaan was in a foul mood. She was on this train to do a job, but nothing had happened for 3 hours now. So far the journey had proceeded without incident, and she had no opportunity to act. Siam, the man she called Sharik, had assigned her this mission. They were traveling together. Theirs was a rare team. No longer were they Mudarib and Mutadarib, master and student. They were partners now. Still, there was a complete letdown. And the atmosphere on the train set her on edge. Despite the instability of present-day Iraq, there were no soldiers abroad, only several policemen. Supposedly, this limitation of the military presence was all out of concern for the complicated political situation, but she couldn't help but wonder if it would more concern for saving money or soldiers' pay. The major powers touted peace while enforcing virtue, when they could be bothered. This railway was just one more example of their dubious policies, supposedly established to help foster interpersonal exchange and economic revitalization. It had originally been used for military transport until public travel was more useful for somebody's agenda.
善意の国際協力ってものが本当にあるなんて思ってもみなかった。これの持ち主はよっぽど平和で幸せなんだな、シャム。
This is so boring. Here we are, the carefree passengers of a modern conveyance operated by a well-intentioned international corporation. Whoever owns this outfit has grown fat on peace.
ひねくれているな。善意の第三者は信用ならないか、カナン。
Don't be cynical, her companion said. Do you really distrust the intentions of others so much?
別に信用なんてシャムしかできない。
The only one I trust is you.
そういうのが相手なら仕事はいつも楽だろうなって思っただけ。嫌ってるわけじゃない。
I just figured having you around would make our jobs a lot more fun. I'm not mad or anything.
襟好みがないのはいいことだ。
It's a good thing, not being too particular.
善意と私欲、どちらが組みやすいかは仕事の内容によるな。
Just keep in mind that whether we align with the good guys or the bad guys depends on the job.
には損得がない分、人間らしい交渉が通じない。それはそれで厄介だぞ。
So-called virtue has no value unless it provides some real benefit to somebody. Otherwise, it's just a bother. Virtue, Canaan sniffed. Virtue was just another name individuals gave to their own biased sense of judgment. A rigid and fanatical concept subject to any number of arbitrary beliefs. One man's virtue was another man's depravity. The very idea made her think of those interminable meetings between political factions. Whoa, what is going on? Yeah. Felt like something just like covered my eye. That was weird. People puffed themselves up as wise and sat at the conference table without the slightest interest in the other side's values. To them, all that mattered was what they had already decided was good and right.
損得がないね。どうすれば利益が出るのか、どうすれば生き残れるか分かってるのに、目先のお金には転ばないってこと？
Some real benefit to somebody, so they know how to profit and how to survive and still manage to not go for the money that's right under their noses?
もっと派手に人生そのものをつまずき続ける？
Can someone really keep living their life like that without eventually stumbling?
客観的に見れば、
You need to look at things objectively.
安酒のようなものだ。それは手に入れやすく悪酔いしやすい。
Simple moral philosophies like cheap booze. It's easy to get your hands on and easily makes you
泥
sick.
酔している人間に話し合いは期待できない。説得するより先に、まず荒ごとで酒を抜かなきゃならん。
You can't expect to get through to somebody who's dead drunk. Before you can convince them of your point, you need to beat the alcohol out of them.
例えば、眉間を秒速で打ち抜いて。
Like by up and putting a bullet between their eyes.
まあ頭にアルコールが詰まっているかは疑問だが。
Perhaps, if it's the brain that's drunk. The man's name Siam curled up into the corners of his mouth. Though he wasn't a fundamentalist Muslim, he still detested alcohol as a tool of the devil. But his use of booze as a metaphor now was inspired less by his inner demons than by his unique sense of humor.
もう笑わない方がいいって言ったのに。
I told you to stop
しか
smiling.
も笑うと顔が怖いんだから。
Makes you look creepy. But she's smiling. She looks so cute. Harsh, yes, but it needed to be said. Cyan's smile was a rare bird newly come to roost. The two had known each other for several years now. Back in the day, she had never known him to smile. As a change of habit, it felt unsettling like a sort of surprise attack.
知っている。そう忠告されて以来、笑わないよう努めていた。
I know. I've been trying my best and not ever since you first gave me that bit of advice.
まあ、俺たちの雇い主は苦行を美徳としている。笑わないというのは方針に合っているだろう。
Anyway, our employer values austerity. Not smiling ought to be our general policy. Canaan herself was equally guilty of a rare display. Her own sour expression had completely turned around. The only time she expressed human-like joy was when she and Siam were alone together. Her name was Canaan. Trained by Siam, a veteran mercenary, she had just turned 14 years old. Damn. Well, this was 4 years ago, so now she's 18. Canaan was not her real name, but a nickname given to her 2 years prior. Hers was a familiar story, that of a child who had lost her parents in her village to the ravages of war. Unlike most of who shared such a beginning, however, she had two major strokes of luck. The first was the ability she had been born with. The second was that she'd met someone who taught her how to foster that ability. As a girl orphaned by war, she had almost inevitably taken up arms. Making herself useful to the powers that surrounded her had only been the only way to survive. The only people she could depend on, the only ones who gave her anything, were them. The moment she didn't meet their expectations, she would go back to being a mere orphan. And so this girl, a victim of war, fell under the protection of the warmongers and was trained to be one of their soldiers. Dang. But then, she was picked up by a man, Siam, who freed her from those who had robbed her of her past. He had no ideology. He was unlike the others she had known in her broken world, the wandering people who had formed a new nation to be their promised land, and the ones that had driven out, now wanderers themselves who styled themselves liberators. Siam was a mercenary who had been hired by those would-be liberators, but he paid no heed to their ideologies of either side. He was a soldier who lived to fight, knowing he was unlikely to see the conflict's end during his lifetime. Canaan didn't know how long Siam had been working as a mercenary. What are we looking at? By the time she wound up in her care, he was already a veteran worthy of confidence. Hey, Punny. What's up? He told her that he'd been kicked out of the army, that he preferred solo missions where he could focus on his objective without worrying about fellow operatives. In that sense, he was something closer to an agent provocateur than an ordinary mercenary. Siam was well aware of his distinct style and position. He sometimes revealed a hint of shame at the fact that the assignments he was given were not officially missions, Muhima, but instead were referred to as jobs, Emo. Still, he was known as a valuable asset on the Liberation Front. They were guerrilla organizations facing off against superior Israeli forces. A lone mercenary who could carry out major operations by himself, he had fit in well with the guerrilla strategy. Be careful about the morning announcements from Nook. Your stream got stopped? Weird. Hey, Mrs. Vian. How's it going? We'll keep that in mind. Thank you. The fact that he was disposable if and when the time came was also quite appealing. And Canaan, once Siam took her in, had grown not as a soldier but as a specialized covert operative. This was a good fortune. The orphan's talents were particularly well suited to acting as part of a unit. She was far better at being a solo diversionist, acting against the enemy organization. And so she had ceased to be a soldier, instead training as a diversionist. She fulfilled her new role adeptly. Siam and Canaan, they worked in concert as secret agents, infiltrating, gathering intel, conducting sabotage. Hey, Punny, was it, like, copyright claimed, or, like, did it just stop the stream and copyright strike? Like, what happened exactly? Curious. Siam and Canaan, they worked in concert as secret agents, infiltrating, gathering intel, conducting sabotage. She learned to operate without backup. Typically, one of their duo would sneak into enemy territory alone, while the other acted in logistics or liaison role. Here and now, however, with their objective aboard their moving train, responding to an urgent request from their employer, the two were working together as a team. So if this train is the transport, the objection must be something big, right? No, what we're after is apparently small enough to be carried on one's person. We're not authorized to look at the contents. The first task is simply to confirm whether it's really on board or not. Interesting. Well, in that case, the job's done. We've both been looking around, and I think it's pretty clear. This train's a bust, Canaan sighed. There's nothing out of the ordinary about it, and it doesn't feel wrong either. Either they're moving our objective at some other time, they got word that we would be here, or there was no such plan in the first place. No, the intel's solid. I trust the person who provided it. They received the intelligence just 2 days prior. Even by their own fast-moving standards, this job was inordinately rushed. A member of American military deployed in Iraq had contacted a Mossad agent. Indications suggested it planned to deliver and hand over a weapon. The Israeli Institute for Intelligence and Special Operations, Mossad conducts foreign intelligence gathering and counter-terrorist operations, along with covert infiltration and the like. It is one of the arms of the Israeli intelligence community, along with entities such as the Shabak, Israeli Security Agency, which handles domestic counterintelligence. Historically, the director of Mossad had acted as the governing chairperson of these agencies. Mossad is regarded as one of the premier intelligence agencies in the world. Damn. Impressive. Board Iraq-Jordan Railway and gather intel, recover payload if possible, destroy if not. Weapon to be transferred, enemy escort, and loadout is all unknown. No logistical support would be provided during operation. It was uncertain why the enemy had chosen to move the mystery weapon along such a dangerous overland route, but the information came from a source that both Siam and the Liberation Front trusted absolutely, and the source had made it clear that the enemy forces were in a hurry to transfer this unknown new weapon. This was a tip that the Liberation Front could not overlook, and they directed Siem to act immediately. The situation was somewhat delicate because the enemy had decided to use a train that crossed the border as their means of transport. Given the tenuous political balance in the region, the Liberation Front couldn't risk open military action targeting an international train running from Iraq to Jordan. Political pressure from Israel and the U.S. might have led the Jordanian government to give tacit consent to a weapons transfer, but if the freedom fighters intervene on a larger scale, it would surely invite a military response. Worst case, things might spiral out of control and trigger yet another full-scale war in the Middle East. Thus, the job at hand required utmost secrecy. The enemy would disavow involvement in any clandestine transport, and those who moved against them must be similarly able to deny any involvement. Stopping and destroying the secret payload was a job for covert agents, and so Siem and Canaan had hurriedly boarded the train, where they had been spending their time staring at the window. 4 hours had passed without any incident abroad. Now they were arriving at the halfway point in their journey, the Jordanian border. So I guess the story is all about this border then. It's interesting seeing how like Canaan reacts and such. Oh, pat down, okay. There, abruptly, things began to change. Without warning, the train, which had hitherto seemed like a promise of safe passage, grew thick with the dangerous scent of the escort convoy. They're making adjustments to the train? What's up with that, Siem? I didn't hear that announced. I've never heard of that happening mid-journey. The problem is with the rails. The ones we've been running on are standard gauge. Past this point, the tracks are all 1,524 millimeters broad gauge that were installed with assistance from the Russians. So standard gauge railway tracks with a 1,435 millimeter, 4 foot 8.5 inches space between the rails. It is the standard in the United Kingdom where it originated, and due to internationalization, an estimated 60% or more of the world's railways use standard gauge. But broad gauge is railway with tracks spaced farther apart than standard gauge. The broader gauge offers some advantages, such as improved stability for cars and better resistance for crosswinds. Russia, India, and Finland are among the countries that use broad gauge, along with some parts of Spain. So why doesn't everyone use broad gauge? In order to run on the new rails, each of the train cars needs to be lifted up in sequence so their wheels can be replaced. Interesting. The wheel exchange made for an extended delay. Each car in turn had to be removed from its couplings. Then each car was loaded onto a lift and refitted for the broad gauge tracks. This is going to take a while, Canaan grumbled. I wish we could just transfer over to a train that could head on from here. Well, the passengers on this train aren't rich enough to complain about a delay in schedule. And this way, the rail company does need to change up the cargo. So long as the train and the passengers arrive safely at their destination, that's all that matters. Yeah, I suppose we of all people have no cause for complaint. But Siem... Canaan sensed that there was more going on than just switching over the train's wheels. The train was being expanded. A freight car, clearly meant to carry goods of higher quality, was being added, sandwiched between a new pair of passenger cars. A total of 3 new cars were added. The only passengers in the 2 compartments surrounding the freight car were armed soldiers. They're all the same shade of blue, 7 soldiers per car, a total of 14. Were you expecting this? No, I hadn't thought this far ahead. Adding a new freight car, huh? Honestly, this would have been difficult to prepare for ahead of time. They were seeing a complex plan unfold, one that might be traceable after the fact, but which might be impossible to stop while it was in motion. They now faced a significant force of enemies that they might have to neutralize using only the firepower they had on their persons. Based on the orders Siem had received, there was 0 chance they'd receive any backup. They're definitely soldiers, can't tell what army though. The soldiers disguised as passengers, and if they're here with a freight car, it won't be an issue. The contents of those cars will tell us if they're Israeli soldiers or not.
そっか。今わかるのは私たちのことはバレてないってことか。
I could ask. I'm gonna ask a few people, Punny. I have an idea of something. I see. So all we know right now is that they're not onto us, but I'll worry about it later.
連中、安全だと判断したからことに出たんだよね。
It looks like they've decided that everything's safe.
そういうことだ。問題は
Only stroke of luck so far. The freight car transfer cast everything into doubt. It seemed to confirm that there was indeed weapons delivery taking place, but recovering the payload was going to be more difficult than anticipated. The train transfer process finished without a hitch. The other passengers paid it little heed. Evidently, they were accustomed to this sort of delay.
強引な計画だね。おかげで応援を呼ぶことも装備の補充もできなかった。
Quite the fix our client has put us in. We can't call for backup, but we don't have a chance to resupply.
後先考えてない計画は
Fanatics-
独特の善意から来るもの。
Fanatics never are very good at planning ahead, I suppose. It's so weird with the voice acting.
周りが見えてないあたり強硬派らしいと言えなくもない。
Or even stopping to sniff the air once in a while. Damn hardliners. At last, the train left the border behind. There were no planned stops between Frontier and Amman. Canaan and Siam needed to complete the job before the train arrived in Amman, which meant within the next 4 hours. The odds were 2 against 14. A difference of power so great it seemed absurd even to consider a plan of attack.
ザイームの配置ミスだよ、シャム。二人でやる仕事じゃない。うん。あからさまに来るならいっそ爆破すればいい。停車中にセムテックスでも仕掛ければよかったんだ。
You was aim messed up in assigning this mission, Siam. This isn't a job for 2 people. Given how black things are, we should just destroy the whole payload. We should have planted some Semtex back when the train had stopped. A plastic explosive developed in Czechoslovakia. It is clay-like and easily formed into different shapes. A similar type of explosion, Composition 4, C4, used by the U.S. Armed Forces, is perhaps more famous. It is used by many military organizations due to its durability and ease of transport.
乱暴だが効率的だな。俺たちの仕事が殲滅ならそれで行きたいところだな。
That would have been dramatic but effective. If annihilation was our job, it would have learned that way too. They checked the cars pretty thoroughly before they departed. Sneaking something aboard the freight car would probably have been close to impossible.
じゃあどうするの？正面から14人はちょっときついよ。
So what do? Take on 14 soldiers head on is a bit of a tall order.
いや、そんな賭け事をするまでもない。
No, we're not going to take that big of a
人手な
gamble.
ら増える。もう一人ここで合流する予定だ。
If you're worried about our numbers, that's going to change. Someone else is joining up with us here. Huh? Canaan was shocked. She felt an unfamiliar kind of fear. As far as she had known, Siam never teamed up with anyone but her.
失礼。同席するよ。
Pardon me, but I'd like to share your seat.
他の席は男ばかりでどうにも居づらいんでね。
The others are all occupied by men, and I'd prefer not to sit with them. As soon as the stranger spoke, Canaan saw Siam's color shift to pale blue, a bad sign. Is that Alphard?
失礼。同席するよ。
Pardon me, the newcomer repeated. I'd like to share your seat. Her voice was low. The muscles in her arms were like taut and like corded rope. Canaan's eyes, her visage was a complex melt of shifting colors. Is this? It went without saying. This was their sole reinforcement, their third teammate.
構わない。座ってくれ。
We don't mind. Please, sit.
どうも。
Thanks. Say, mind letting me sit, have your
場所を
spot,
譲ってくれ
miss?
ないか、お嬢さん。
Oh shit.
子供は保護者の横に座るものだ。その位置は私向けだろ。
Thanks. Say, mind letting me have your spot, miss? Children should sit next to their guardian. I should be in your place. Canaan sighed.
シャム、お嬢さんは耳が遠い？それともアラビア語はわからない？
Siam, is this young lady hard of hearing, or does she just not speak Arabic?
俺の横に座れ。彼女は今回の情報提供者で、我々の雇い主の一人だ。
Canaan, come sit.
馴染みでもある。
Jesus Christ. Canaan, come sit next to me. This is one of our employers, the one who provided our intel. She's an old friend of mine. Canaan said nothing. But she did get up from her seat and sit next to Siam. She'll do as he asked, although she didn't trust this woman. She didn't like the way she said old friend. It brought up Oliver's natural cynicism.
ご挨拶だな。シャム、
この子がお前のバックアップか
Charmed, I'm sure. Is this kid your backup CM?
今回俺はダーファーだ。こいつはシナーン向けでな。腕は水準以上だが、村っ気がありすぎる。
No, I'm the protection this time around. She's more suited to offense. Her skills are the real deal, so is her
目の
attitude.
前に相手がいないと目を覚まさないのでは、守りは任せられん。
But she's not lookout material. She's only really gets going when there's someone to fight.
それはまだ訓練中というわけか
Well, well, so she's still in training. I like this newcomer. The woman regarded Canaan with a cold gaze. She gave the impression of a snake trying to sense the body temperature of potential prey.
可愛いじゃないかタイプだよ
She's cute. I approve.
でその左手は人並みに動くのか
How's her left arm? Can she move it all
訓
right?
練途中のお嬢さんは体の管理もできない半人前
Or has your little lady in training not learned how to take care of herself yet? Canaan glared sidelong at the woman. She wasn't offended by the remark itself. The fact was that her left arm was still in pain. What unsettled her was that this woman's powers of perception able to detect Canaan's injury through the heavy cloak she wore.
動くよ少しすりむいただけ
It's just a
すぐ良
scratch.
くなるし問題はない
It's just a scratch. It won't be a problem.
そうならいいが原因は傷をつけたのは列車に乗る前か乗った後か
Okay, but how did it happen? Did you get injured before or after you boarded the
そ
train?
れでお前がまだ半人前の兵士かただの間抜けかわかる
They'll tell me whether you're just half a soldier or simply a fool. Canaan did not reply.
だんまりかおいシャムどっちなんだ
Shamu is what she calls Siam. That's interesting. The silent treatment, huh? Hey Siam, which is it? He didn't answer. Had she seen something in that silence?
はあ
Of
そういうこと
course. The stranger could read Siam's silence better than anyone, better than his own partner. The woman's stoic face grew just a shade brighter. Her smile was entirely sarcastic, but at least it was a display of human emotion. It was a smile as if to say, well done, as if Ken's injury were some fated thing.
見たところ戦争孤児かまったく懲りないなお前も仕込みは何年になるんだ
I'm guessing she's a war orphan? It seems you don't learn either. How long since you started working on her?
引き受けたのは2年前だ。
It took her in 2 years ago. 2 years ago, 2003, the Middle East, a war orphan. All that information was taken together, left no question about just what battlefield she'd seen. The Iraq War. She had lived through the long night of the war that for the winning side had been little more than a display of overwhelming resources and overwhelming technology.
安心したよ半人前だが心構えはあるわけだ
That's a relief. She's only half a person, but at least she's
で
ready.
は技術はこれから見させてもらおう
I'm looking forward to seeing her skills in action.
お前が連れてくる以上は一発には鍛えられているだろうしな
If you brought her along, Siam, her training must be sufficient. Now that she inferred Ken's background, the woman's enmity seemed to abate. Their initial reluctance to trust each other had apparently been mutual. Canaan wasn't necessarily happy, but if this was the team Siam wanted, she would accept it. As the woman had observed, Canaan had been trained by Siam after all. And Siam's judgment was absolute. Canaan knew him as her instructor and mentor, and the ideal soldier, utterly reliable. She turned her gaze away from the woman and looked out the window. The passing scenery drew out her memories of the life she lived over the past few years. A girl who had lost all of her relatives to war. The tale of a child who had never held a gun before, becoming a full-fledged soldier at the heels of the veteran mercenary, all of it came hazily drifting back into her mind. All the life I've known was taken away by the war. Are we going even further back in time? Jesus Christ. The echoing of gunfire in the distance, the sound of buildings ablaze. I couldn't help but think of how much smaller and simpler those sounds were than I'd imagined them to be from stories. No place had seemed safer to me than my house, and it was reduced to ruin by a single artillery shell. A few moments after that blast, a group of strange men came barging in. I could hear their heavy footsteps, their coarse voices muttering. They're dead, we've killed them, Luckily for me, my father had been thinking quickly and had sent me into the basement. Unluckily, he and my brothers were still in the living room when the blast hit. It wasn't just the furniture that was now gone without a trace. I sat in the basement, thinking. From the men's conversation, I realized that they were looking for my father's corpse, my older brother's, and my own. I can remember every word those soldiers said. Something had clicked in my mind as I listened. I committed to memory how many men there were, what their voices sounded like, what names they called one another, and so that I would never, ever forget. Focused on hearing their every word for the next hour, I felt neither fear nor boredom. I gathered that there was no trace of my father's body, but they had found my older brothers. Satisfied, the soldiers left. Jesus! All of this happened when I was 12 years old. Trapped under the rubble, it was days before I was rescued. I lost my family and any place to belong. The adults who found me realized that I suffered emotional scarring, but they didn't have the time to bother with that. They're dead, we've killed them. Ah yes, there are too many things one needs to do in life. In my case especially, I expect I'm going to be overworked. It was quite simple, the reason I took up arms. It was not atonement that I sought, but equal compensation for what I lost. Unjust usurpers, deeds whose cost was reckoned with blood. I had still not been paid what I am owed. The balance must be settled. I only ask as much as they took from me. That is why I carry on, never resting, with the relentless precision of a machine. It is simply a tale of sorrow giving way to resentment, giving way to cold reason. Was it odd that I've never felt malice? Perhaps I could see too clearly. I could see things on a broader scale than others. Could see where the evil was, where the flaws were. Could see it also clearly that I was dumbstruck into sheer objectivity. The weak are evil. My family, my father, people I shouldn't have been proud of, had too many flaws. People of conscience who esteemed a righteous society, who embrace complicated and contradictory things, who try to become good sheiks, an Arabic word denoting the leader of a tribe, or a wise man, an honorary term of respect for someone who commands trust. In the modern day, it is often used to refer to scholars, community representatives, and people in high-ranking management positions. Well, now we know the purpose of Sheik's name from Legend of Zelda. Interesting. Their many failings created enemies, invited war, and brought on their defeat. Violence was a vulgar thing, far beneath the cultured behavior of my father and brother, but it still had the final word over them in the end. We may have been cruel to those who would shame us, yet we have tolerated too many of these foreign invaders. Balance is key. One must clad oneself in complexities, yet be simple at the core. Taking action always requires a first step. If someone takes from you, you take it back. If they kill you, you would kill them back. Action and reaction. Hey, Happy. Going good. How are you doing? We should have thought more simply. By perceiving everyone's different than ourselves as our enemies, we brought on the war long before it was inevitable. Even if my father and brother had been operating in a vacuum, they probably would have done the same. But every family had so many kin to hold dear, so many others who cloud their perspective. Except for me. Ha! My family and my kin are utterly gone. Apart from the determination I already possessed, I knew I needed to hone myself. My growing skills as a soldier were necessary for me to achieve my goals, and more basically, necessary for me even to survive. My goals. At the beginning, that was all I really thought about. Once I became an orphan, I resolved not to rely on anyone. My trauma wouldn't let me trust anyone else. And yet eventually, I wound up feeling a sense of trust for this man who found me and committed 2 years of training to me. It was something I never thought I'd feel again. Doing good. My neck hurts, but I'm doing good. There probably isn't anyone around with the patience to train a novice. I wasn't qualified, but I wound up sticking with you. Sam was always more freelancer than soldier. He belonged to a liberation movement, but he made his living taking on jobs as a reliable mercenary. Refers here to the Palestinian Liberation Movement, a political movement formed in response to the conflict arising between the newly resettled Jewish people and the pre-existing Arab Palestinian residents, advocating freedom of the Palestinian people from Israeli rule. There has been a long recurring cycle of terrorism and revolt followed by periods of peace, but to this day, the issue remains fundamentally unresolved. Even in 2020, still unresolved. I guess his role gave him a lot of freedom because unlike a grunt who simply fired guns, he was allowed to act as a sort of instructor. He had no close ties within his organization, which was convenient for me. I take it up arms not because of any ethnic conflict, but for my own personal cause. I'm being compensated for teaching you, but that doesn't make this some kind of formal contractual arrangement. Neither of us should waste the other's time. If I decide you're not suited for what I'm teaching, I'm calling the deal off. Luckily for me, CM ignored my unique background and upbringing and simply trained me to be a fighter, growing as an instructor along the way. Good firearms will not limit your abilities. Automatic weapons act as equalizers for soldiers on the battlefield. If both sides have equal technology, then everyone is theoretically capable of the same things as everyone else. Conversely, if you have a gun that isn't up to modern standards, you'll be weeded out first.
手にしたものが良質か粗悪かを測る術であり。
The first thing you need to learn is the skill to tell whether the weapon in your hands is superior or inferior. Guns are simple, not nearly as complicated as people, you just pull the trigger. My father had handled weapons occasionally, but never showed me how to use one. Hey, Cassie. No worries. Political struggle was his preferred form of conflict, but in the end, it was that bias that defeated him. I took up guns to avoid repeating his mistake, but also the feel of a metal grip in my hand seemed to suit me. At least that was how it always felt to me. Maybe my fondness for weapons was deliberately ingrained into me by Siem's instruction. Don't forget that you're a woman. However superior skills may be, you cannot change your physique. If you're facing multiple opponents with a pistol, shoot the nearest target twice. Even if you don't hit, pivot with your knees and fire at the next enemy. Keep them all engaged, don't let them get close. I mastered the basics the first year. I say this not out of any excess pride or self-confidence, but I was miserably the best of the soldiers other than Siem himself. After that, Siem and I began working jobs together. Siem was against it at first, and I had the ability, and he at least had the objectivity to acknowledge that fact. He was an exceptional teacher, and I was an even more exceptional student. I was an ideal subordinate, an inhuman combatant willing to use whatever I deemed useful to get an edge. Bye, Sparky, take it easy. I had countless brushes with death out on the battlefield. The reality of war is that people die regardless of their tech, their experience, their abilities. I ought to have accepted the reality when I lost my family, but it was the battlefield that made the truth completely clear. The society in which I had been born seeks to assign value not just in monetary terms, but for individual dignity and even ideologies. But only death is truly impartial. I was able to survive through all of this largely thanks to Siem's aptitude. He wound up protecting me countless times when my experience put me in peril. His intervention was not out of any fondness for me, but rather a cool calculation in the interest of completing the mission. He knew I could be counted on. Never much to look at, he incurred even more scars in the course of rescuing his risk-prone student. There was almost no place that he hadn't been shot except somehow in the head. Maybe there was a trick to that? I wanted to ask him secretly, but there was no allowance for questions while he was my shield. I could only make such small talk once his time as my protector had come to an end. And even then, up until this very moment, there'd never been a good time to ask. I had just wound up believing that Siem would never die, that no matter how many times people opened fire on him, he simply wouldn't get hit where it really mattered. That was all probably a delusion on my part, of course, but the fact was that he just didn't die. Of course, his heart had already died some time before. Bullets can kill someone who is already dead. He deserved my trust. We were on the same breed, he and I. Siem would always have my back, no question. Every once in a while, a truly exceptional soldier turns up, superhuman. Keep up your mercenary career long enough, you'll run into one sooner or later. My training was complete. I was no longer a student, but a mercenary, and that is what Siem had to tell me? I responded with sarcasm. What was this, some Hollywood script? Siem had never really joked with me before. No science fiction. This is as real as it gets. On the battlefield, individual gear and skills can only carry a soldier so far. Death comes from all of us, equally. My turn could be next, and after that it might be you know? But in the midst of that sort of deadly equality, there are monsters who can overturn the balance. Siem went on to tell a story of two soldiers, one wielding a revolver and one an automatic handgun. The widely anachronistic revolver is no match for the automatic. Even disregarding magazine size, a higher rate of fire meant superior firepower, period. A machine pistol capable of firing 3-round bursts would turn the revolver user into Swiss cheese. Typically refers to a handgun capable of automatic or semi-automatic fire, though frequently also denotes a weapon between the size of a pistol and submachine gun. Because of their comparatively limited magazine capacity, such weapons are not, however, capable of the high volume of fire of a full-size machine gun. Famous models include the Beretta M93R and Glock 18. And some modern automatic weapons are equipped with a switch that allows the option of firing 3 bullets each time the trigger is pulled, compared to full auto mode, in which the weapon will fire continuously for as long as the trigger is held down. Firing 3-round bursts allows for better conservation of ammunition and control of the weapon. It's not about the technical limitations of the revolver versus the auto.
兵士としての限界でもある。
It's about our awareness of those limitations, and at the same time, about our own limits as soldiers. Siam went on, talking about how similar weapons could equalize the abilities of soldiers, about those who had removed that color from themselves and deviated from the equilibrium. For instance, the unparalleled gunfighter capable of rapid fire like that seemed in Hollywood and Western, a type of character who had actually existed. Experts who could fan the hammer, unloading 5 shots at a target in the span of a single second. Of course, simple rapid fire alone wasn't worth fearing, it had to be accompanied by the skill to put it on target. Siam had probably just been trying to offer an explicit example of a time when exceptional human skill could surpass the capabilities of an available hardware. It all seemed too fantastical, but he had been dead serious. Apparently he had run across such rule breakers in the past.
生まれついての戦争や重機の申し子、強運の塊、我々とは違う身体の機能、そういったものを持つ超人は稀に現れる。
Born warmongers, patron saints of small arms, lucky souls, people with different physical capabilities than you and I.
身体機能に天性の差があるのは言うまでもないが、その才能がピタリと戦争に符合する幸運な兵士。
Natural differences in physical prowess, sure, but also talents perfectly suited for war. Maestros of the battlefield.
戦場でのみ人間の規格から逸脱し、一個の兵士では起こし得ない戦果を上げるもの。
Soldiers far outside.
兵士にとっては嵐のようなものだ。
Soldiers far outside the norm, who could accomplish things no single soldier should be able to. When you meet an enemy like that, it's like starting down a storm. Still, even according to Siam, such superhuman could only deal with 3 or 4 opponents within any given moment. So assuming he had 5 or more to attack them in that moment, there'd probably be no problem taking them down. I was relieved. He wasn't talking mere fiction, but he wasn't just telling me some joke. So then what was his story all about?
お前は超人ではないが、極限ではある。それを自ら承知しているのも知っている。
You're not a super person, but you are superb, and moreover, you know
だから
yourself.
こそ気をつけろ。
Still, that's all the more reason to be on your
部
guard.
隊の境界を誤らず、己の才能に頼るな。
Don't misjudge your body's limitations, and don't depend too much on your own
お
skill.
前は完成されている。自分の性能を正しく把握しているのなら、決して破れることはない。
You are complete. So long as you have your proper grasp of your own capabilities, you won't be defeated. Thus did Siam not acknowledge my ascendance to the status of a warrior. It was an achievement to be proud of, to be seen as his soul pure as a combatant, perhaps even his better. More than anything, the esteem I held for Siam was a reflection of the esteem he showed me. We were the same. That's why when the time came, I had scarred my left arm. I wanted a physical symbol of our connection. Oh, that explains. Okay. So this is why it's kind of going back, and now it's going to probably go forward. So this is just kind of explaining why Canaan became such like a ruthless killer, essentially. Interesting. Introductions were a simple affair. Siam had no need to give his name. Canaan had no interest in the woman's, and the woman seemed satisfied with what she knew of the other two. Shall I just call you Siam and young lady then? Newcomer asked.
問題がないのなら、そちらの今の名前は。
Siam shrugged. If you're okay with that now, what name are you going by now?
ああ、連携は必要だな。カナンというのはどうだ？
Yes, I suppose we'll need to do that to coordinate. How does Canaan work? Canaan couldn't suppress the sound of irritation. She tugged wordlessly in Siam's coat, like a pouting cat stalking to claim to what it wanted for its own.
すまない。それは問題がある。
Sorry, but that might pose a problem, Siam replied.
今は定かで通している。
I'm joking, the woman said. I'm actually going by sadaka these days. In Islam, this refers to the act of giving spontaneous voluntary charity to the needy. It is distinct from zakat, a form of obligatory almsgiving.
それじゃ、そろそろ本題に入ろうか。
Now then, shall we get down to the matter at hand? Sadaka. Let's go with Sadaka. Hopefully. Sadaka explained how the job would unfold. They'd wait until the train had traveled for an hour beyond the border before moving against their objective. Hopefully they could finish the mission an hour before their arrival at Amman. Canaan peered at Siam's face as he and Sadaka spoke. His color was, as always, blue. That shift earlier to an unlikelier color, the cloudy whiteness of an unfamiliar stranger, had lasted only for a moment. She could, like, see colors. That's interesting in people.
目的となる貨物車両は3両目。その前後である第2と第4車両にはそれぞれ7人ずつ護衛が配置されている。うち第4車両の2人は定期的に後部車両の見回りをするようだ。
Our objective is in the freight car, number 3, Sadaka explained. Several guards apiece are stationed in cars 2 and 4 on either side. It looks like 2 of the guards from car 4 leave to patrol the back end of the train at set intervals. And speak of the devil. Without even shifting her gaze, Canaan could confirm the presence of 2 soldiers moving through the car in which he sat. 2 blue blotches passing by, the color of alert escorts, a rendering in organic blue. The color of fighters skilled in the use of guns they carried. People who wished to wear this color usually rubbed Canaan the wrong way. Just being near them made her uncomfortable. Seen as a contradictory counterexample. Despite his dangerous hue, he eased his nerves. But whether the colors expressed themselves as painful or gentle didn't mean anything. The colors were merely colors. Whether warm or cold, everything was done neatly in simple colors, as if painted with the run-of-the-mill materials.
列車の最後尾は同じく貨物列車だが、こちらに積まれているものは至って健全な物資だ。最悪の場合、ここに籠城できないこともない。
The last car of the train is also a freight car, but everything in there is ordinary goods. If worse comes to worse, we can conceivably hole ourselves up in there, Sadaka explained.
まあ、催涙弾の一つでも投げ込まれればおしまいだがね。
Of course, if someone were to toss in a tear gas grenade or something, we'd be done for. Let's try to stay away from any direct conflict, Steam said. The orders were to avoid both casualties and eyewitnesses.
ことは秘密裏に。
Agreed. We infiltrate the freight
連
car.
中が私たちに気づくのは、列車がアンマンに到着し、何もかも立ち去った後か。
The enemy won't know where we were ever here until the train arrives in Amman and we already be long gone.
いいね。それは私の注文通りだ。
Over and done. Perfect. Let me just confirm then, Seam replied. We've established that they're transporting the weapon. Now our objective is to recover it and get out. Any changes to that?
スポンサーとして同志の行動に期待し、また私もこれに参加する。
None. You do your part, I'll do mine. It had been just over 5 hours since they boarded the train. Canaan felt a sense of relief that at long last the action she'd been anticipating would finally commence. Their objective was to recover the parcel in the freight car toward the front section of the train. They would infiltrate the car without alerting the guards, acquire the payload, and then disembark from the train as if they were just normal passengers. Top priority was acquiring the items. Secrecy was secondary. If it turned out that they needed to take the payload by force, they'd been given permission to initiate combat. Violence was definitely on the table, if it came to that. If they were detected, they wind up in a 3-on-14 shootout aboard a train.
OK。私とシャムの役割はわかる。けどこの女は何をするんだ。そもそもどうしてスポンサーが出向いてくる。
Okay, Ken said. I know what you and I are going to be doing, Siam. What's her job, though? Why is our sponsor even here in the first place? She's a code-breaking specialist. Ordinarily, they wouldn't have sent a sponsor personally, but time was of the essence. When the plan fell into place yesterday, she was the only operative available to make the rendezvous. And so they sent a codebreaker. She started to give me Alphard vibes, which is interesting. Don't be like that. She's an expert at what she does. This will be a good experience for you. How not like you, Siam, Sadaka said. I guess the rumors about you going soft over some kid were true. She's just causing me an epic amount of trouble. Why? Is that the sort of story that's been going around? No, we've just heard that you picked up some extremely capable individual named Canaan. I didn't expect she'd be like this young lady here, though. Dang, these two are sassy. Humph, well, I didn't know someone like you was our sponsor, Canaan replied. Not that we've seen much of you over the past 2 years. You've got the wrong idea. I'm only one of the many of your supporters. I'm not a mentor. I don't have the time to play an individual part in every little scuffle.
そのくせこんな仕事に顔を出してるじゃないか。
But you got time to show up in person for a job like this?
別件で近くに来ていてね。そのついでだよ。
As it happens, I do, Sadaka replied. I was already nearby, dealing with another
今回
matter.
はネタがネタだし、無視するわけにもいかんだろう。
And given the details of this mission, I couldn't simply ignore it.
すればよかったのに。こんなの私とシャムだけで十分だ。
I wish you had. Seema and I can handle this on our own. The enmity between the two had become like a steady rhythm, driving along their conversation. It did make them interesting to listen to, for better or for worse.
定かその別件とは何か問題でも
What did you mean by another matter, Sadaka? Seema asked. Were you here because there was some problem? Oh, Canaan was intrigued. Seema wasn't the kind of person to ask irrelevant questions. Had he twigged something that might affect the mission? Whatever the case, Sadaka smiled pleasantly.
プロジェクトの一つに問題が出てきてね。
An issue cropped up in one of our
人材
projects.
の調査と兵器の不具合の2点だ。
I've been looking into the personnel involved, along with a flaw in a weapon.
そうだな。例えば、お前が懐に飲んでるものは殺傷能力が高い武器という触れ込みだが、当たったのに効果がないとクレームがあったとしたらどうだ。
Here's an example. How would you feel if you were dealing with a gun that you expected to be quite lethal, but which an observer claimed had no effect whatsoever?
何それ。そんなの不具合どころの話じゃない。
What's that supposed to mean? You're not talking about a flaw there, Canaan
ちょっ
said.
とした欠陥商品じゃないか。
That would just be a completely defective piece of hardware.
ああ、その通りだお嬢さん。今まで信頼していたものに欠陥があったでは、我々の信頼に関わる。
Yes, young lady, exactly. When there's a defect in something you've always trusted, it affects
無
that
視してもい
trust.
い不安要素なんだが、取り除けるなら取り除いた方が商品になるからね。
You could ignore it and hope it won't cause you trouble, but you're better off ridding yourself of something that isn't up to snuff.
現地に行って問題点とやらを確認し、しかるべき対処法を提出する。つまらない仕事さ。
When such a situation arises, I head on site, assess whatever problems there are, and recommend appropriate courses of action. It's a boring
近
job.
頃はこんな駒遣いばかりだ。コードブレーカーならぬリスクブレーカーというところか。
These days I'm basically a maid, less a code breaker and more a risk breaker, you could say.
そう。偉そうにしてるけど、誰かの駒遣いなのは変わらないんだ。
I see, so you act all important, but that doesn't change the fact that you're just running errands.
まったくだ。
Through a
ま
battlefield,
るで戦争の
yes.
使いだよ。
Sadaka brushed aside Kanan's insult with the errant confidence. Kanan scowled. The woman was so sure of herself. She turned away and gazed out of the scenery outside, and then she realized the snack she'd been gnawing on was gone.
シャム、
See him, Kanan hissed.
今日は多いなそんなに不満か
Take it easy, Kanan, Siam said. I know you're under a lot of stress.
シャム、話の途中だが、少しいいか。
Siam, Sadaka interjected. Do you mind if I interrupt real quick?
簡潔に済むのなら
So long as you keep it quick.
さっきから気になっていたんだが、お前の相棒は何を食べている？
Sure, so I
あなたの
noticed.
携帯食か？
Sure, so I noticed that your partner has been nibbling on something. What is it? Some kind of new snack?
そんなものだ試すか
That's right. Want to try some? Aw, cute face. Without saying anything, Sadaka took one of the offered treats. She tore open the paper wrapper on one end and stuck the contents between her teeth like a cigarette, just as Canaan had. Canaan watched her resentfully, knowing what she was tasting. A simple, unpretentious sweetness, the purity of concentrated sugar.
ではなく、そのものだ。
Sugar,
た
Sadaka
だの
said.
砂糖じゃないかこれ。
Is that really all it is? So she's literally just gnawing on a stick of sugar? That's crazy.
あシュガースティックを固めたものだ乾燥して固形化したものを見つけて以来大のお気に入りでな今じゃ注射器を使って固形化している
Yes, hardened sticks.
言うなら日本製のものがいいそうだ
Yes, hardened sticks of sugar. They're dried and formed into shapes. We've become big fans ever since we found them at a market. Nowadays, they use injectors to shape them. The best ones come from Japan, I hear. Cannon focused on gnawing on her own stick, not really listening to Siam's explanation. There was a brief silence. Sadaka let out a sullen sniff.
変わった思考だな。うまいのか？
You have strange tastes. You really like these things?
うん。無駄がないのはすごく美味しい。
Yeah, I like that there's nothing to get in the way of the flavor. Sadaka raised an eyebrow dubiously. Interesting. The time had come. They got up from their seats without a sound. Draped on their hoods, Canaan and Sadaka made their way through the train, doing their best to draw no attention. Seam had put together a timeline. They should spend no more than 30 minutes at most on their infiltration. In addition to the soldiers stationed in the passenger cars, it was possible that the enemy had also looked at disguised as normal passengers. A seat left open for too long might arouse unwanted suspicion. The team needed to sneak into the freight car, obtain the payload, and return to their seats without a single minute wasted. Seam was too tall and muscular to be well suited for infiltration. He would hang back and act as the girls' rear guard, and if the operation was discovered, his task would be to secure an escape route for them. We're in position, Sadaka called out on one of the tiny voice-activated radios that the three carried, synchronized watches. She and Canaan prepared to make their way to their final objective in the freight car up ahead. Despite their clashing personalities, they moved almost like twins as they went about their work. It was evidence that their training had instilled them with similar priorities. Just so I'm clear on this, Sadaka said, all you're bringing is that Beretta and one spare magazine. Yeah, hope you're okay with that. Yes, if it comes to a fire... Yes, if it comes... Yes, if it comes to a firefight, I'll let you handle shooting back. My job here is code breaking. As long as I have my PC and someone to cover me, I'm good. Both of them were going in a minimal loadout. As a covert agent in enemy territory, they made Canaan uneasy, but then, if a fight did break out here, the mission was already a partial failure. The organization couldn't spare equipment for a team that only needed it if they fouled things up. Have you checked the route? The route's fine, as long as you're fine. This isn't going to be desk work. Not my specialty, but an acceptable level of risk. This isn't my first rodeo. What about you? You ready for this? Yo, this music is bopping. I've ridden my fair share of wild horses. Once I get on it, don't fall off. Quite the swashbuckling little heroine, aren't you? Let's get this circus started. The garb that the two girls wore under their cloaks were quite different from the norm of Middle Eastern women. Aside from the fact that one wore red and the other black, their outfits were rather similar. Both of them had dressed for maximum freedom of movement. No problems with the infiltration route, Sadaka reported. We're on the move. With all the casual air of traveler going for a stroll, without any hesitation whatsoever, she headed for the outside of the train. No problems with the infiltration route, we're on the move. The call cut out. From here on, the team would retain radio silence except in cases of emergency. As the girls back up, Seam had to decide on a course of action. He could try making his way through the inside of a train, heading straight toward the sequestered freight car. It would make him obvious, but that would at least draw the guards' attention onto him for a time. He had no intention of trying to get into the freight car itself, of course. His goal would be simply to draw the guards' eyes. He can claim to be on his way to meet a friend. The guards would be sure to intercept him and try to usher him away from the freight car. While that was going on, Canaan and Sadaka would hopefully be able to sneak inside. But it seemed that wasn't going to be an option. There were no ordinary passengers in the cars where the guards were posted. If the thing they were protecting was what Seam thought it was, these guards would be good. Any unusual action he took would provoke them, only heighten their alertness. He didn't want to do anything to complicate things for the girls. He decided that his best course of action was just to stay ready in case things were bottoms up. I like how he's just sitting there this entire time, just like... waiting on two girls to finish their mission. Great. Like he's just waiting. He checked the gun he'd hidden at his feet. Then he pictured in his mind the guards in the nearest compartment, their builds, their gear, their positions. Veteran fighter though he was, he could think of no good way to make up for the sheer difference in numbers. If a fight did break out, it would still be 1 against 7. To break through an enemy position held by soldiers who knew what they were doing, he'd have to completely abandon his own better judgment. Those who are willing to rise above themselves can overcome any stroke of luck. Beta? He was reminded of a story he had been told as a student, a fable involving a board game. Life was represented by the board. There was a clear, defined endpoint. One proceeded towards that end, but dire pitfalls had been set up on the way to the goal. It was a valuable lesson. One shouldn't have a goal in life, or rather, one shouldn't think of the end as a goal. The proper way to live one's life was to realize it was already over. One must focus on the moment. Yo, that's the game of life in a nutshell. True. This game of striving for the goal, for the end, that was just a way of rushing headlong towards one's death. The priorities were backwards. One shouldn't have a goal in life. One shouldn't seek meaning in oneself. To seek reward, to seek proof that you've lived by achieving some hypothetical endpoint, that was a fool's game. Seam's ability to live without hunting for such proofs was one of the very few things on which he prided himself as a mercenary. Dude's stoic as hell. Slipping his gun out of its hiding place, Seam narrowed his eyes slightly. Until now he had been a lone soldier, put to use however his employers deemed necessary. He held no tenets, no opinions. He acknowledged that he was an instrument of war. He acknowledged that this was an age where such instruments were necessary. How many battlefields had he passed through? He could see no value in trying to sum up such experience with some complex, ever-shifting philosophy. There were those who would wage war, and those who would try to end it, and those tools were necessary for both of those ends. That was all the justification a soldier required. Warriors fought, and then they died. There was no room for anything resembling a normal life. That's who they were. Demons, not men. To Seam, to this mercenary, this was a simple fact. His watch showed that 6 minutes had passed, 24 minutes to go. By then they would all know if they had failed or succeeded. It was too long and yet too short. A gulf of time for him to fill with his own rusting memories. Are we about to go back and see Seam's memories? He had been born into an age of enduring conflict. 1948, the first Arab-Israeli War, which started with the Declaration of Establishment of the State of Israel. In response to the Israeli Declaration of Independence of 1948, the 5 nations of Lebanon, Syria, Transjordan, Iraq, and Egypt, later joined by Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Morocco, declared war and marched on Palestine. Armistice agreements were signed in 1949, with the ultimately triumphant Israel taking control of most of Palestine. Over 800,000 displaced Arab refugees. A conflict between those who had formed their own nation at the end of their wandering, and those who would now never be able to return to those lands. 1956, the tripartite aggression over the Suez Canal. Any attempts at negotiation or diplomacy were ineffective. The Middle Eastern hegemony? I've never seen that word before. Hegemony? Shifted into the hands of nations, further deepening the turmoil. That 1956, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser declared the nationalization of the Suez Canal. Opposing this move, the United Kingdom and France backed Israel in an invasion of the Sinai Peninsula, leading to a violent conflict with Egypt. In 1957, the United States and the Soviet Union intervened, arranging a ceasefire. And then 1964, the Palestinian Liberation Organization was formed to retake its founder's rightful homeland, his homeland. Oops. An umbrella organization with the goal of the liberation of Palestine from Israeli control, abbreviated PLO. After Yasser Arafat, founder of the PLO's dominating faction, Fatah, became chairman, the organization took on the de facto role of the Palestinian government in exile. The Oslo Accords of 1993 saw governance centralized into the interim Palestinian National Authority. Following the death of Arafat in 2004, Muhammad Abbas assumed the position of chairman of the PLO, as well as the president of the Palestinian National Authority, the peace process still ongoing. Holy crap, all these different names, all this different history. Like, this is all, like, actual history. You don't really learn about this in history classes. Fun fact. 4 years prior, he'd been born in a region west of the Jordan River. Like the other young men of the faith who had thrown themselves into the liberation movement, he too had chosen a path of belief. But his beliefs were too rigid, too severe. He did not know value compromise. He learned to focus on what he could accomplish as a soldier and strove to become one of the elite in order to end the fighting as soon as possible. He believed that this was the very best that he could do. The organization he joined in his teens was small, but it had been affiliated itself with the PLO and then joined up with Colonel Gaddafi's camp, which had provided its members the necessary soldiers' education. I remember that name. The former supreme leader of Libya, seizing power in 1969 coup d'etat, he is perhaps best known for his radical anti-Western rhetoric during the 1970s and 1980s, as well as rumored backing of various terrorist groups. In the latter part of his life, his relationship with the West gradually improved. He played a leadership role in the formation of the African Union, AU, in 2002, becoming its chairman in 2009. Gaddafi was disposed and killed in 2011 by rebel forces in the Libyan civil war. Now keep in mind, this game came out in 2008, so this is actually excess information. This battle pot's actually just additional information. Interesting. Infighting, however, gradually reduced the organization's numbers. He used the 82 Lebanon War as his opportunity to temporarily distance himself from the PLO and thrown himself instead into fighting in Afghanistan. The 1982 war, in which Israeli forces invaded the neighboring country of Lebanon to retaliate against PLO forces present there. PLO leadership moved to Tunisia, and a multi-international force was installed in Lebanon, with the United States providing its core constituents. Interesting. That was when he acquired the name Siam. He acted as a military instructor for the Islamic volunteer soldiers from Thailand. His students had bestowed upon him the former name of their kingdom. Oops, hold on. Yeah, no, hold on. I need to go back. When the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979, Muslims from all over the world joined up as volunteer soldiers to fight their Soviets in the name of jihad. After the withdrawal of Soviet forces, those volunteer soldiers did not completely lose ties with one another. Some of them went on to form international networks such as Al-Qaeda. Dang. So, the people that we had fight the Soviet Union, like the US helped fight the Soviet Union way back when, suddenly became... Oh, God. Jesus. How things have turned. Wow, a new name. And when he accepted this new moniker, something that represented something other than himself, he had ceased to be the young man who sacrificed himself for his ideals. At the request of some former acquaintances, he returned to the PLO in 1990. Yet again, infighting had brought the organization to the brink of collapse, and he'd been tasked with helping to restructure it. It was around then that he reached his current standing. The sub-organization that he belonged to was in dire financial straits, and so to keep it solvent, its members had begun taking on mercenary contracts for covert ops from the PLO and Islamic extremist groups that were former affiliates. Same, King Cheese. He'd been a soldier for over 30 years, though all of that time he had fought and he had survived. The fighting had honed him on every level. Much of it had been purely mercenary to secure funding to keep his organization afloat, but he recognized that as being meaningful in its own way. In order to tip the balance in the fighting within their own country, his compatriots needed to encourage other nations to go for each other's throats. Accepting this as the evil that it was, they continued to wield the hammer of justice. Eventually he had seen so much that he had no longer felt the evil, and then he had no longer ever felt the justice. However, the consummate soldier, he was too grounded in harsh reality to deceive himself with flowery words or abstract ideals. Everything that he truly understood he'd come to realize while on the battlefield, and one thing had become completely clear: the fighting that raged through his homeland would not end during the lifetimes of his generation. His own existence was nothing more than a blip on the battle radar, a tiny detail in the midst of something vastly larger than himself. Bit by bit, his once rigid faith gave way to something more nihilistic. Times change, and so did values. At some point, the human heart went on to change as well. His changed convictions left him alienated, and he reformed himself into a solitary soldier. He longed for battle, yet felt no commitment to any particular conflict. And so, despite his legendary record in uniform, he became a mercenary outside the military establishment. His compatriots began to view him as nothing but a warmonger who fought without beliefs, and they were not so far from wrong. No longer a true partisan of any cause, what he was much harder to define. Ultimately, he was a jack of all trades. Recruit training, guarding VIPs, intelligence operations, subversive activities, he tackled them all. One thing led to another, until he arrived at the last major job he'd undertaken as a soldier. The theater was in the Iraq War. There was a battle on the fringes, unrelated to the main conflict itself. And then he found a girl who'd lost everything, her kin and community all victims of collateral damage. The tragedy that struck her had unfolded in a single day. When Siam found her, a chance discovery as he was making his way through the area, it was a miracle that she was even breathing. According to the reports, the entire population of the village had been annihilated. Friend or foe, there were no possible survivors, yet Siam had found one. He'd taken on this war, and that included aiding any civilians once the fighting was over. Hey Zados, how's it going? Long time no see. Even if he knew it was someone unlikely to last much longer than another day. How have you been? Dang. Holy crap, she's bloody. And yet, in defiance of his expectations, the girl clung desperately to life. She pulled herself back from the brink of death, pieced by her broken physique back together, and declared that she wanted to live. Easier said than done. This child had no relatives, and all records of her family had been wiped out. In order for her to live, she would need to be reborn as a soldier. There probably isn't anyone around with the patience to train a complete novice. I wasn't qualified, but I wound up sticking with you. You watched? Nice. Well, you're at the end of a well, this is the beginning of a stream, but the end of a story. I think. I don't know. Our brains are being exploded with history right now. Like, there's so much history about the Israeli war and Afghanistan war being thrown at us. And here's the thing, this is all true stuff. Like, probably, like, Siam and Canaan and Sutika, like, that, those characters, probably not so true, but there's probably, like, likenesses, to be honest. But it's like history class all over again. Except it's not the stuff you learned in history. This is new stuff that you just never learned. Perhaps because something fascinated him about this new responsibility, he took on the task. To say that the girl wasn't soldier material would have been an understatement. On a scale of 1 to 10, she was less than 0. Her personality was an issue. She was whimsical, unable to keep her emotions in check, and incapable of working as a part of a cohesive unit. Her general knowledge and awareness of local customs were also sadly lacking. She could read and write, but there was something fundamentally broken about how she processed information. She saw it called the sun blue. At first, Siam figured that she'd simply been taught the word blue to refer to what most people acknowledged as yellow. It wasn't long before he was disabused of this notion. The girl wasn't wrong, everyone else was. The things she said weren't untrue from her perspective. To her, the sun did look blue. She was still able to distinguish the color yellow from the color blue the same as anyone else, but she had a very peculiar condition, very rare, but known to humankind for centuries. Synesthesia. That's right, it's when you see color, or hear color. Right? I think that's what it was. I don't remember. Oh my gosh. I wish synesthesia was blue so that way I would explain it. But that explains why she was saying like everyone was different colors. She was just like us, except in how she perceived the world. Words would come to her as shapes, sounds as smells, moods as colors. It had isolated her within her own village, and thereby saved her life. That isolation was also why she had no initial aptitude for soldiering. She struggled to work within an organization as those around her struggled to understand how she operated in a group environment. Seema no doubt she was the only soldier he'd ever trained who could make eye contact with another person and instantly understand where they fell short, and what she could do to make up for it. Running her in a standard squad was almost impossibly difficult. Seema soon found that he often needed to give his new novice his undivided attention. You still unafraid of guns? In terms of trained reactions and physical skills, there was nothing more than he could teach her. She mastered shooting and all the fundamentals of a standard physical training. And yet she was still an astoundingly timid girl. Afraid of the battlefield, afraid of guns, afraid of the trigger. She even seemed afraid of loading a magazine. Every day, Siam found himself thinking she wasn't cut out for this. But every day she threw herself back into the training, facing all the things she feared. Revenge, she began to suspect. No doubt she wanted the ability to fight so that she could strike back at the nameless bunch who had taken her village and her family away from her. She wants to be like me, Siam thought. She wanted to kill. No, she wanted the strength to be able to kill and then immediately to put that killing behind her. You don't have to be afraid of guns, you know. You fear death because you've known safety. Leave the fear behind. You need to conquer your past, but you also can't forget that safety does exist in this world. She was still a respectable human being, not a soldier. He and she were cut from different cloth. Realizing that made him wonder if there was anything you could truly teach her. Something a little... Is it just me, or there's something a little oh my gosh. Thank you, Siam. Is there something unnerving about a little girl holding a submachine gun? Like, I feel like there's something a little unnerving about that. Yes, I know it's Canaan, and we know Canaan's a fucking badass in this game. But still a little unnerving. Sharpshooting is only about fundamentals, he said. Fire only at targets within range. Fire from cover. Fire first. That... Yeah, same. That's it. Easy to remember, but hard to pull off. Make it your own. Oh, and one other thing. If you do get into a gunfight, make sure the other guy never gets back up. I feel like if you were to give a Canaan a hug, though, she would stab you in the back and then rip you open. She wanted it, that much was clear. And while she might never make much of a rank-and-file soldier, there were better things for her to do than learn regulations and squad tactics. She could survive best on her own. Away from the conventional battlefield, she began to achieve startling results in extreme solo missions. The more skilled her opponent, the more she rose to the challenge. She was a natural-born duelist. No, that wasn't quite right. The girl was an assassin. Seem had to admit that she improved each and every day. The almost daily change of pace was good for him too as a teacher. The only problem was the source of her motivation. You're still thinking about revenge, aren't you? She fell into her typical sullen silence, a scolded child unwilling to tell a lie. Inwardly, Seem acknowledged his misstep in judgment. She might have the makings of a perfect assassin, but the assassin's life would never be a good fit for her. Good, he said. Hold on to your vengeance. Repay the insult to your people, but don't stop there. You're capable of much, much more. Can I say, like, this anime style also is unique, I feel like. You don't really see too much of it. Kind of like an elfin, kind of elfin lead? Don't become a machine, stuck repeating the same motions. Take the easy way out. Give yourself over to hatred and you'll die inside. Maybe there were no more physical skills to teach her, but he still needed to give this girl the mental training of warrior required to survive. Yeah, you did it. You hugged her and now you're dead. Remember this, Canaan. Hatred for its own sake is meaningless. If your hatred isn't tempered by a sense of duty, you'll be lost. That lesson, more of an admonishment, was the one thing he'd held on to in the wake of his own disillusionment. His heart bore scars that would never heal. Revenge was a prize without reward, claiming it would break you if your heart was made of anything less than steel. So he told her to harden her heart into something that could not be broken. He only hoped it was enough. Even steel wore away over time, bit by bit. A year had passed since then, a year that felt like a day. Now one thing in particular rose in his mind. Before this job, for perhaps the first time ever, Canaan had asked him for something. She wanted a tattoo, just like his. He had no choice but to agree. There had still been one day to go before the job, so they'd gotten it done on location before boarding the train. The tattoo, a snake, represented bad luck and loneliness to the locals. She didn't care. She saw it as a kindred spirit, a creature driven by the same nothingness that fueled herself and Siam. So she got a tattoo at the age of 14. Interesting. The timid girl and the black snake. If he gave himself over to sentiment, he might have said that the black snake looked somewhat uncomfortable there, coiled on the arm of this girl bent on survival. Good job, Cassie. Back on the train! What the hell? These two were... What the hell? Canaan and Sadaka slithered silently along the underside of the train, suspended just above the ties hurtling past beneath them. The slightest mistake, and whoever made it would be instantly reduced to an unrecognized smear of meat. Hey, Sadaka hissed. Pick up the pace. She was taking point. Canaan silently complied. She concealed her foul mood, but not so well that Sadaka couldn't see it. Clearly, she didn't like their chosen route. Would you prefer the roof? Sadaka asked. Canaan rolled her eyes. The roof is death. But she did lie. This is no circus. Sadaka let out an appreciative chuckle. Had the little princess been expecting some more elegant means of reaching the target? If this doesn't suit you, I guess you'll just have to play King Kong next. You like the Empire State Building, yeah? I don't know what you're talking about, Canaan said, but you're making fun of me, aren't you? Why are they just having a conversation under a train? Of course, shooting the breeze like this is so delightful. Normal small talk is just a bother, but when you can mouth off in a situation like this, you'll never be bored. Canaan furrowed her brow. She might not ever find it in herself to like Sadaka, but it didn't seem that they shared a very quirky sense of humor. The doors to the freight car were shut with combination locks. It seemed like an outdated technology for protecting the classified material the car was carrying. Evidently, the enemy had been forced to make use of what they had available. Sadako quickly punched in a numerical sequence and the lock opened. She had acquired the code sequence before arriving on the train, due diligence for a codebreaker. They're under a train? Yeah, they were under the train. What? That's our security, Sadaka said as they stepped into the car. I was expecting a crowd inside. Either they're really confident or complete idiots. Sheeple rolls by. Yay, Sheeple. The break-in had been disappointingly easy. They surveyed the freight car's interior, still anticipating a further challenge. The space was divided into two compartments. One was sealed and held the item they were after, while the other, in which they now stood, housed a console room for managing the first.
監視窓から確認できるな。目的はあれだ。物自体は小さい。もともとはフォートデトリック製のものだよ。それを秘密裏にイラク派遣された米軍生物戦実験部隊からイスラエル側のモサドが受け取ったんだそうだ。
Can you see it through the observation window? Sadaka said. That's what we're after in that case there. The object itself is small. It was made at Fort Detrick. Apparently, Mossad struck a secret deal with the U.S. Biological Warfare Experimentation Unit deployed in Iraq and got them to hand over to the Israelis. The United States Army installation in Frederick, Maryland. The 5 square kilometer grounds are dotted with various biological and medical research and development facilities. The name is sometimes used to refer specifically to the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, USA MRIID, a key institution in U.S. efforts to protect against naturally occurring microbes and diseases as well as biological weapons. I believe this is the UA virus that we're after. I think we're about to grab the UA virus. Based on what I was told, it would be something in the size of a briefcase. Canaan mused. So we just bust the door down and smash open the case? I was advised not to break anything. So we go in like we belong here, open the case, and get out before anyone's the wiser. We're gonna be doing Animal Crossing after this. After I eat. Splatoon, what we'll see. You're part of the job, assume there be guards. The rest of this is my area of expertise. You can work that console? I brought my own, but what a mess.
予想以上に頭が痛い。この無造作に放り出されたケーブル、何の笑い話だ。どうやって入るか楽しみにしていた私がバカみたいだ。どこぞのネットカフェかここは。
Alright, I have a question. How did Sadaka say that much when it's only 8 words? I brought my own, but what a mess. And she just read off an essay worth of words. Is that how Japanese works? I have no idea. Sadaka scowled at the slapdash array of electronics. Oh, there we go. Talk about a headache. Look at those exposed cables. Is this someone's idea of a joke? I was looking forward to a challenge, but this is low-budget internet cafe level. Sadako grumbled as she hooked up her laptop. The security here was laughable, even considering how much of a rush the enemy had been in to arrange this weapon transfer. It looked like she needed to do more than input the password that the Sheik had given her into the terminal. It's like they're not worried about counterintelligence at all. Are the Israelis seriously this lax? You know, Israeli IT engineers are supposed to be better than this. How could this level of idiot strike a deal with the US military, or are both sides this dim-witted? Come now, Canaan murmured. You like the Pentium N, don't you? A CPU released by the Intel Corporation, originally developed in Israel. Its design focused on power conservation for use in laptop computers. Its compact size and brand appeal making it popular in many countries, including Japan. Another question. Why does, that is a weird suspender that she has going to her butt. How can I not? Israeli engineers the coolest. Alright. Canaan frowned. She might be loath to admit it, but their opinions really were very similar. The PC booted up. Sadaka logged into the terminal and entered the password. She worked with a skill and alacrity that would have made any codebreaker
ハッキング
proud.
なんてものは参加した時点で終わっているようなものだ。その場で暗号を破るなんて職業がまかり通ったのは大昔の話でね。
By the time we get to the hacking stage, the job is practically over, she said. The days of having to decrypt things on site are largely in the
的
past.
に言ってソーシャルハッキングに勝るセキュリティ解除はない。
Quite frankly, there's no better way to break through security than social hacking.
ソーシャルハッキングってなんだ？
Social hacking, Canaan asked. What's that?
ああ、探偵のようなものだよ。
It's sort of like detective work.
PC の知識、プログラムテクニック以外の手段で情報を手に入れることだ。セキュリティに関して一番詳しいのは当事者だからな。交渉、内定、果てはゴミ漁りまでやる。
Sure, Zadus. It's sort of like detective work, getting information in ways other than relying on computer know-how and programming techniques. Nobody knows more about the security of a site than the people responsible for it, so you negotiate with them, run surveillance on them, even root through their trash, Sadaka
今回
explained.
こいつのセキュリティに関わっていたのは3人だけだったからな。まあ楽な方だ。
There are only 3 people involved with security on this job, so it was a
通
breeze.
常このレベルの機密なら10人以上の関係者全員からキーを取らないと難しい。おい、さっきのあれよこせ。口寂しくなってきた。
She likes the sugar things too, yes. Normally for something with this level of secrecy, I need keys from 10 or more people, and hey, let me have one of those sugar things. I need something to put in my mouth. Canaan frowned, but handed her a sugar stick. Zadus, my subscriptions are Kokichi and Maki. And I cosplays Kokichi. And I have Shuichi's hat.
じゃあ暗号破りっていうのは名前だけ？私みたいにその場で答えだけ探すってことじゃないの？
So why do they call you a codebreaker, Canaan asked? Aren't you basically just an on-site troubleshooter like me?
何の話だそれは。
What are you talking about, Sadaka asked.
私が言っているのは単に人間の方がハックしやすいって話だ。そりゃ答えそのものを手に入れるのが理想だが、まずありえない。
My point is simply that people are easier to hack, she continued working at the keyboard as she spoke. Ideally, that'd be how you get all what you need, but that's not doable in practice.
それにソーシャルハッキングも数値を埋める行為だぞ。調べ上げた感情や性格、経歴を数値化しないと解は得られない。
Besides, social hacking is all about plugging in numbers too. You're just wasting your time researching someone's emotions, personality, and history if you don't find a way to turn the results into numerical form.
その後、手に入れた情報を整理し、公理に基づいてパスコードを導き出す。
Interesting. When you're done, you arrange the info you've gotten, and the way to derive, say, a password becomes self-evident. She unlocked the third layer of security as she spoke. This where there was an access password, an infrared scanner lock, and then a lock linked up the wheels of the train that prevented the compartment door from being opened while the train was in motion.
よし、終わりだ。
Oops. Alright, that's done,
こ
she
いつは
said.
まだ試作品だからな。一研究員の個人名でログインできる。
See, the thing we're after is still a prototype, so I can log in under one of the
あ
researchers'
とは研
names.
究リーダーのアカウントで管理者権限を。
Then I could use the researcher's lead's account to give me admin rights in.
何？
What the?
どうしたの？
Is something the matter? Canaan asked.
パスコードが変えられている。お手上げだ。優先順位の高いものから打ち込んだが、3つとも外れた。
They changed the passcode. I tried the 3 highest priority ones I had, but none of them worked.
じゃあこの1時間後っていうのは？
What does this mean here? 1 hour remaining, Canaan asked.
パスコード入力を拒否されている。
It means passcode input has been locked out for another hour.
手持ちのコードに正解があるとしても、入力そのものができなくなった。
Even if any of the other passwords I have are valid, the system won't even let me enter them anymore. Well, dang. They're running out of time. Already 15 minutes had passed since they begun their operation, allowing for 5 minutes to get back to Siam's car. They only had 10 or so minutes left to work.
積み込む前に気まぐれでコードを変えたな。管理がずさんなら予定もずさんか。聞いてないぞそんな話は。
They up and changed the codes before loading, damn it. I should have known they'd mess up their updates to schedule along with everything else. Classic.
珍しく感情的だね。
Is there anything else we could try?
そうだな。パスによるアクセスはできない。
Maybe, Sadaka said, since we can't get access to the passcode.
ロックを解除する信号を直接送るしかないが、 それこそありえない。
We could try sending the unlock sequence directly to the lock itself. No, that's
信号
impossible.
自体は暗号化された上でプログラムに収納されているが、その数値から信号を拾い上げるのは不可能だ。
The sequence itself is encrypted and stored in the program, so there's no way for us to get it.
それプログラム自体は開けられる？
Canaan murmured. Can you open the program itself?
可能だが意味がない。
I can, but there wouldn't be any
いいから
point.
面白そうだし、ちょっと変わってよ。
Humor me, I'm curious. Switch places with me real quick.
わかったか。この数値の中から信号を拾い上げるのは不可能だ。いや、時間さえあれば可能だが、
Don't you get it?
数日の作業で。
Don't you get it? You can't get the sequence from the string of numbers in there. Well, we could if we had the time, but that'd be days of working.
あ、信号ってきっとこれだ。
Ah, this must be the sequence here, Canaan said.
189A C455 5893 E5AE 888 312B C367 AB29
189A, C455, 5893, E588, AE, 888, 312B, C367, AB29.
これでやってみて。
Give that a try.
だと
The hell? It worked.
当たった？当たりならあの中のものは私のだけど。
Did that work? If it did, I get to have what's inside. Psycho swallowed wordlessly. She'd have been happy, but the first stage of her job was finished after all. Still,
共感覚。お前がそう呼ばれる人間なのは資料で読んだ。
synesthesia, she said.
つまりそういうことか。
Synesthesia, she said. I read about it in the report. Is that how you did that just now?
珍しいものじゃない。単に文字に色がついて見えるだけの話。目とか耳とかが一緒なだけだよ。
It's just a different way of understanding things. I can see what colors the numbers and letters are.
それで済ませる話か。
That's your explanation?
私の認識が甘かったようだ。今のお前の行為は直感だけに頼ったものだな。
You're telling me that you intuited that code just by seeing how all the numbers looked? Synesthesia, a curious condition found in people all over the world to varying degrees. It was defined as a tendency to experience the stimulation of one sense with additional perceptions in one or more other senses. Human beings have 5 senses: sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. People who process 2 or more of these individual senses simultaneously are known as synesthetes. Letters could have colors. Sounds may have shapes. A word might taste sweet or sour. There are many variations, each a unique way to perceive the world. The condition was not generally an impairment. The letter's color could have a real meaning. There's a reason that each sound had a particular shape. Synesthetes picked up on the additional sensory information not intellectually, but intuitively. It went beyond vision and hearing, simply working as a combined sense. It created a new form of perception in its own right. The senses themselves didn't literally fuse into one another, of course. For a synesthete, the 5 senses can complement each other reciprocally. For instance, visual information might also be processed as sound and then combined with direct auditory input. Visual cues that were also seen through the other senses could radically increase the seer's ability to comprehend what they were perceiving. A typical image on a page serves as a good example. The ordinary person perceives such an image solely through the sense of sight, a single input, a single level of perception. A synesthete, however, might perceive the same image with one or more additional senses as well. Information obtained this way is analyzed by the brain, the secondary perceptions complementing and depending the information provided by the primary sense. God damn, there's so much information. The human brain, however, cannot fully grasp such perceptions on a logical level. Well, thank you. In the end, the beneficiary of such experiences simply known what was been perceived without knowing the reason why. It is akin to the experiences of a newborn child. The child has not yet learned language, and so it struggles to grasp its mother's intent when she speaks. An entity without intellect exerts all of its physical self to learn on its surroundings. The nascent brain has not yet separated the language cortex and the visual cortex. In an infant, both function are the same thing. Once those features do become separate, knowledge as we know it first comes into play. The organization of knowledge in different regions of the cerebral cortex efficiently reduces certain burdens on the brain, but at the cost of reducing sensory acuity. Seeing the big picture, understanding the details simply by feeling, not following an ordered thought process, but arriving at its conclusion in a single step. Such possibilities might include picking out the meaning of a sequence of digits that appears meaningless at first glance. For one who did not know intellectually what part of a tree was the leaves and what part was the trunk, it would still be possible to tell them apart based on the different colors or different shapes. The simplification of things, the condensation of stories. instinctually understanding solutions without having to follow some other process of derivation. This was how a synesthete like Canaan perceived the world.
それを表現する言葉を持たなくても違う表現、色や形でそれが何であるかを読み取れると。
So even if you don't know what some code or message is trying to express, the colors or shapes will let you interpret it anyway? Sadaka asked.
文章全体を見ればどれが必要なものでどれが不要なものかぐらいはわかる。
Yeah, it's like how when you look at a whole sentence, you can sort of tell which parts are important and which parts aren't. If the text as a whole contained some story, the programmer's intent was there in cipher. She could pick up on it in those colors and flavors, feeling the touch of that meaning on her skin. Because of her very nature, Canaan could look at a sequence of unknown information and immediately sense which parts were important. She had learned to accept that she couldn't understand the why behind it.
でもこうなったのは2年前からだ。以前は肌触りぐらいしか感じられなかった。
I've only been able to do this since about 2 years ago, though, she said. Before that, I can only feel things on my skin.
今じゃ音とか匂いも同じように感じ取るから前よりは見えるようになったけど。
But now I can do the same with sounds and smells, which lets me see better than
共
before.
感覚は先天的なものだというからな。
Well, they say that synesthesia is something you're born with,
お
Sadaka
前
said.
の場合、何らかの後遺症で共感覚が強くなったのか。
So did some kind of accident or treatment make her stronger?
つまり、
You know, such as her faculties had improved through random happenstance. Perhaps when she was on the brink of death, some of her bodily functions had broken in order to keep her alive, and had somehow changed when she recovered.
皮膚感覚の優れた生き物は波で周囲の情報を測るというが、お前の感覚はそれに近いと。
They say creatures with unusual tactile acuity pick up information on their surroundings through waves. Are your perceptions something like that?
近いのかな。そんなのは知らないけどその気になれば周りぐらいは見て取れる。
Sort of, maybe. I'm not really sure, but I can see my surroundings almost as if they're made of waves whenever I want to.
今私が何をしているかわかるか。
So then you could tell me what I'm doing right now? Sadaka asked.
肩をすくめているのが匂いで見える。
Yeah, I can see the scent of you shrugging your shoulders. I can see the scent, Sadaka thought. So that's what using your whole body to perceive things is like. This girl had eyes pointing in every direction. She was a veritable sensory prodigy. She had no blind spots. Her ears and nose, her tactile sensations saw on every side at once.
確固たる直感。
That's quite a gift you have, Sadaka
人
said.
間が知識という武器の代わりに失った第六感という才能。
Like a sixth sense the rest of us lost somewhere along the way in exchange for intellect. Maybe it wasn't so remarkable after all. It was something all human creatures had once possessed, an early gift taken away from them by the serpent or primal knowledge. Progress, not regression, had cost mankind this capability. Sometimes true evolution necessitated the loss of some superior power in order for a species to thrive. Humans had grown more complex through language, culture, and thought, the only creatures on Earth to distance themselves from their animal nature. And what was it they had lost? The trick of knowing only answers that look? To receive an answer without thinking, that was nothing more than the abandonment of thought.
ああ、まるで原始人だ。
You're primitive, basically. Sadaka smirked inwardly at the thought. This girl was such a simple creature. No wonder Seam's edge had dulled from having to deal with this.
定か、そちらの進行は
Sadaka status. The sudden sound of the radio snapped her back to attention. They had under 5 minutes left to go.
問題ない。少しばかり予定が狂ったが、お嬢さんのおかげで解決した。
No problems. Things went a little bit awry, but the young lady here managed to resolve it.
急げ。こちらも雲行きが怪しい。護衛による乗客探しが始まった。
Also barking.
容疑だそうだ。引き延ばせて2分だぞ。
Roger that. Try to hurry. The guards have started harassing passengers here. Something about a spy. We got 2 minutes tops.
こっちではいつものことだよ。
Same as ever then, Sadaka
了解。
replied.
リンチが始まる前には戻る。
We'll be back before the firing squad lines up. Work, work.
やはり携帯できる形だったな。
She stared at the briefcase-like container and opened the compartment. It really is portable
中に
then.
物があるのは端末から確認済みだ。お嬢さん、カサバルがそのケースごと運んでくれ。
I've already confirmed the contents via the terminal. I know it's unwieldy, but would you mind carrying the case, young lady?
決して開けるなよ。万が一ということもある。下手をすれば、ここら一体
Yeah, it's
死
a
の
UA
土地だ。
virus. And whatever you do, do not open it. No matter what. One misstep and every living thing for miles around dies.
なんだって。
Wait, what? Ken said?
シャム、聞き忘れてた。今回の獲物は何？
Siam, she radioed. I forgot to ask, what are we acquiring here?
最も小さく凶悪な兵器の一つ。
One of the smallest, most sinister weapons in the world. This was a brief silence, but Canaan already knew what these words implied. A chill ran up her spine. She could feel the latent threat before her now.
Shamu.
Shim, this is... a virus designated risk group 4 by the American CDC, their highest risk rating. Abbreviation for Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, a multidisciplinary research institution under the jurisdiction of the United States Department of Health and Human Services. Headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, is known as one of the world's foremost organizations in the field of virus and infections agent research. Secret experiments were carried out and disseminated and infect people with it in order to demonstrate its lethality, and then genetic code was tweaked to increase its efficiency as a bioweapon. They call it UA Proto. That was it. That was the name of the fragment of hell that had brought ruin to her life 2 years earlier. UA, a microscopic demon released by mankind. It was the year 2000. The retrovirus awoke in the Drakensberg region of South Africa, a type of virus that reads genetic data and uses reverse transcriptase in order to copy its own RNA. Or more simply, it uses the cells of other organisms to make copies of itself. Because the retrovirus genome is made of RNA, retroviruses are thought to be more unstable and prone to sudden mutations than DNA viruses. Drakensberg is a mountain range in South Africa that takes its name from the African words for the Mountains of Dragons. Part of the range forms the natural border of the Kingdom of Lesotho. The highest peak, at 3,842 meters, is Taibana Nathiliana, which means beautiful little mountain in the Sesotho language. Deforestation carried out in the name of advancing national development unleashed the pathogen upon the land, rapidly infecting the local village. The virus's combination of a high lethality rate and a high infection rate wiped out the entire village in a matter of days. The South African government carried out radical sterilization procedures, burning down the forest in a several kilometer radius. Hey Sparky, welcome back. Luckily, the virus was still vulnerable, and sterilization effort proved successful until 3 years later, but agents from another nation collected samples of the virus from the same woodlands and began research on military applications. They improved the virus and successfully created a weaponized prototype. The demon awoke. They chose a village already engulfed in the flames of war as a test site. Under cover of the conflict in Iraq, the weapon makers carried out the experiment. The virus unleashed and the village vanished. The lethality rate was over 90%, the infection rate and survivability of the pathogen both exceptionally high. This was a tiny demon, invisible to the naked eye. They had taken everything from the young girl called Canaan. After that, there were rumors of further development. The improved form of the virus was given the name UA, and the last of the prototype that had destroyed the nameless Middle Eastern village was frozen. Yes, frozen. Not disposed of, not eradicated, the weapon was difficult to use, but those who possessed it still felt that there was value even in the inferior prototype. Furthermore, it represented a great deal of research money, which meant whoever it might be, should a buyer emerge, they would sell. Canaan had no words. Why was this thing here now? She felt nothing, no grief, rage, or despair. She simply thought calmly, someone is still alive who is willing to use this weapon. That includes the soldiers who are here to protect it. Hey, young lady? I know, right, we need to get to this case, Cesium. She spoke. She moved mechanically, removing the case from its compartment. Whatever free will she possessed a moment before had vanished. Sadaka watched her, satisfied. Then both girls stiffened with alarm. A message appeared on the monitor. Case connection broke. Security breach possible. If disconnection is unresolved over 60 seconds, alert broadcast will commence. You didn't disable the alarms, Canaan snarled? Complain later. We'll never get it reconnected in time. Call CM now. The call was brief and the conclusion was clear. The parameters of the job had changed. A fight was unavoidable. They would need to strike first. CM, Just listen, I'll neutralize the guards in the rear car. While I do, keep pressure on the ones up front. Once I've secured the rear, I'll give you the signal to fall back. For the time being, Canaan and Sadako were trapped. There were 7 hostiles ahead of them and 7 more behind. All the girls can do now is set up the freight car to buy themselves time. And yet... I think this calls for a more aggressive solution. Canaan, wait! She cut the connection. Her eyes gleamed with menace. There was no time for hesitation. This was time for battle. This beeping, oh my gosh. You alone? Sadako was incredulous. Are you out of your mind? Having confidence in your skills is one thing, but be realistic. There are 7 soldiers out there. I know that, but these guys aren't as good as CM. Canaan was all action. There was no room for emotion. She analyzed her problem, and now she was going to solve it.
勝手に死なれるのは困る。お前は組織にとって貴重なサンプルなんだが。まあ、それも枝葉の話か。
I can't have you dying on me, Sadaka said. You're a valuable asset to this organization. Oh, never mind. It was clear that conversation was going to be a thing right now. The gleam in Canaan's eyes was that of a beast on the hunt. Give me the case. I'll give it to Siam. I'm used to working with him. If we can catch him in the guards and the pincer attack, we can end this quickly. Canaan paused. Near as she could see, Sadaka's words didn't have the color of a lie. She was a codebreaker, forced by the situation to fight. Alright, she said. Try not to drop it, and just be careful not to get in Siam's way. Uh-oh. Same goes for you. Don't try to prove anything out there. If things get dicey, get out. Dang, she's an Assassin Creed. She could smell combat. The sound of the wheels and the colors of the wind were now both a frigid blue. Honestly, Canaan murmured to herself. If it was going to come to this, why do we even need her for anyway? Sadaka's color bothered her far more than that of the forthcoming slaughter. Right then, Siam murmured. The car developed into chaos. Guards barked out orders forbidding anyone to leave their seats. They brandished their guns as they interrogated one traveler after another. The passengers were quaking with fear. While the train was passing through a country, the local government held police authority on board. The soldiers bullying the passengers were Jordanians, Siam could tell, having come aboard during the freight car rearrangement. He counted them among the 14 hostiles. It was only a matter of time before they realized that Canaan and Sadaka were no longer in their seats. I guess it's time to get started. Siam let out a sigh of resignation. Hey, you there, back in your seat. Now things were getting interesting. Siam walked wordlessly toward the front of the train. It was clear that wherever he went, death would follow. The other passengers scrambled toward the back of the car. No chance for another surprise attack this time. These soldiers were already ready for combat. They pulled the trigger as soon as they had to target. This was 1 against 6 now. If he played this by the book, Siam wouldn't stand a chance. Rule number 1 was always shoot from cover. It was the first lesson he taught his students. Thing was... Damn! Rules were made to be broken. So much for playing it by the book. Fastening the top button of his caution bulletproof coat, he strode forward. I'm a wall. Walls feel no pain. Down to 1 against 4. He opened the door. Bullets ricocheted all around. He cased his enemies, assessed their power. He might get injured, but he was confident he wouldn't go down. Right now, there were only 2 guards in the dining car ahead. Time to improvise. Barging in on dinner like this? Where are my manners? His innards were hurting, his bones creaked, but he fought to keep his aim steady. He had some internal bleeding, but nothing he couldn't power through. Sorry, never was health broken. He took another step forward. Reckless maybe, but if he didn't deal with these before reinforcements came, well, no point worrying about that now. Also, what up, Brammy? How's it going? Not when there were people left to kill. Dude just murdering everybody, holy crap. Just like that, he was down to 3. The worst was yet to come, and his body would bear the brunt of it. Still, Siam was unafraid. He was dead from the beginning. A walking corpse, he traded his courage, his passion, for an emptiness without fear. Canaan's heart beat in time with the blaring alarm, but her mind was clear. With mechanical coolness, she considered her orders and the time she had available to carry them out. She inferred the positions of her 7 targets, assessed the potentials for a strategy that could overcome 7-to-1 odds, and picked her moment. This she did by instinct. Canaan didn't even need to think. She let the hard soles of her shoes slap down on the roof of the train car as she ran. That should get their attention. Up top! They're heading for the engine! Cut them off! The soldiers sprang into action. One of the gangway doors opened. As the leading guard stepped through, a red-clad figure flashed into view on the roof of the adjacent car, her hair streaming in the winds as the train raced along at 80 kilometers an hour. She fired twice. Her trigger control was flawless, aided by a lightweight slide and short recoil operation of her Beretta. One instant, two targets, right between their eyes. Trigger control is the shooter's ability to precisely manipulate a firearm's trigger. Although ostensibly a simple movement, it takes considerable skill to break a shot cleanly and quickly reset for a follow-up shot. Good technique is essential for shooting accurately at speed. And short recoil operation, a temper operating system used in most auto-loading pistols, as well as some machine guns. The mechanism uses recoil generated by the weapon's firing to quickly load the next round in position. Yep. It should have been 3. The strike should have worked. But she only got 2. I failed. She missed her shot at improving her odds to 4 to 1. Or maybe instead of blaming herself, she owed her enemy some respect. They moved well. Dots. At this rate, failure was just a matter of time. She didn't have the firepower to go up against 5 well-armed opponents head-on. At the moment, they were on equal footing, both sides cowering under cover. She'd never been able to pick off one by one. But sooner or later, the soldiers would realize they'd come lay down enough suppressive fire to force her to stay down while someone rushed her position. If she tried to rush them instead, the instant she emerged from behind her seat, she'd fall victim to a hail of bullets. Canaan sighed. For the moment, it was a stalemate. She couldn't see the enemy, they couldn't see her. But then she heard one of the soldiers. No capture necessary, just eliminate, cover me. The guards were using hand signals, but Canaan could perceive them as sounds. There. Lo, red eyes! The vibration of the guards' movements, the sight of the breathing, the scent of gunpowder. That was enough. They weren't on equal footing anymore. Her 5 heightened sentences melded into a single potent awareness. The enemy was on her turf now. The angle of the floor and walls, the strength and positioning of the wooden seats, the humidity of the air, subtle cues of friction and impact. There was nothing she could not detect. Her systemic perception precisely mapped the interior of the car inside her mind, showing her everything she might need to know. There was no vague impression of rough calculation. She had an innate grasp of the exact spatial relationships of everything on this limited battlefield, and all she had to do was wait for the approaching enemy and soldier to reveal the last bit of information she needed. Man down! How the hell she shoot him from there? She could feel the guard's confusion. Her snapshot shouldn't have landed, yet it caught the advancing soldier right between the eyes. The survivors were breathing regularly now, even their lungs betraying their alarm. The unexpected counterattack brought bewilderment and then a rush of fear. Still, Canaan knew that if she simply tried to brute force approach and charge the enemy position, she only provoked them into bringing their full firepower to bear. That would limit her options. She needed to modify the parameters of the fight first. Canaan was outgunned. She wasn't going to be able to change that. She might be able to drop one or more of them with another quick shot, but then she'd only wind up getting overrun. She had one option left. She could abandon cover, go for broke. She needed to drop 4 targets in the span of a single breath, or she'd be done for. Ha! Had that raspy laugh been hers, the enemy's. The guard's leader took aim at Canaan's forehead, her finger on the trigger. Huh? She picked up the dead man's gun. Not for ammo. To carry out the plan she'd envisioned, she knew she needed something more than her Beretta. What are you doing? Shoot her! The leader of the guards cried out. The subsequent barrage was too uncontrolled to be called suppressing fire. Gunfire intended to prevent the enemy from moving, frequently used when the opponent is behind cover. It could be an effective means of gaining a tactical advantage by forcing a foe to remain in a given position. The 4 men fired wildly, trying in vain to follow Canaan's inhuman movements. Canaan sped away. She could read the ripples of the air, could even predict the movements of the soldiers' muscles, the angle of their gun barrels, the trajectories of their shots. But she knew she couldn't hope to dodge every bullet. So before the storm could strike, she dived out the door of the car. Whoa. She got all of them, I think. Whew. She let out a soft sigh as her combined senses became distinct one more. She needed to neutralize 4 targets in the span of a single breath, and that was precisely what she'd done. See? Look at that, she said. Now that's what I call a circus. She landed with a flourish back inside the train car. She had cleared out all the soldiers stationed in the forward compartment. They had successfully recovered the payload and wiped out the enemy force. Now her task was to evacuate ASAP. She wanted to check in with Siam, but knew she should risk breaking radio silence without knowing the situation at his end. Probably doesn't even need to bail him out anyway. Dude, she just killed like everybody! Holy shit! She wanted to rush to him, but he knew Siam would be disappointed in her if she did. And now that she made it forward of the secure freight compartment, doubling back to the rear of the train only to have come forward again would be a waste of time. Maybe I should head for the engine and stop the train. With their cover blown, they certainly couldn't go to Amman, so she and Siam would need to get off the train en route and conceal their whereabouts, probably the sooner the better. The scent shifted. She heard sharp footsteps. She spun around, ready to fire. There was a rustling of clothes and a new sensation crashed against her skin. She just got shot. Sadaka's arrival had helped put an end to the gunfight in the rear compartment. She caught 2 of the guards in a pincer attack, and before the last enemy had a chance to regroup, Siam had managed to gun him down. Reckless as ever, Siam. Reckless as ever, Siam. You know your age. You really need to stop letting yourself get shot. Sadaka strolled over to him. Only after confirming that all the guards had been neutralized did Siam finally let his mind shift from combat readiness to simple high alert. I only did as much as was necessary, he said. I knew you'd show up. I wanted to give them an obvious target so they'd leave their rear exposed. The tension between them eased. It had been years since they'd been alone in the same room together. Still, that strategy isn't like you, Sadaka said. Why didn't you fall back to the next car? That's what you should have done. A tactical retreat. Keep them disrupted and on the move. Siam considered maybe it really hadn't been necessary to make this car into a battleground. If it had accomplished one thing, it was allowing the fleeing passengers the chance to make it to safety. Don't tell me you finally grown a conscience, Sadaka said, as he read his mind. I'm just thinking about our employer. With our cover blown, the enemy might have been able to ID us. Had to do what I could to make sure you guys wouldn't get a bad reputation with the Liberation Front. If you say so, Sadaka said. So this was all over the UA, which means that this little spate of bloodshed is on the Israelis for trying to get their hands on some weaponized virus? And we're just meeting our punishment to the thieves? I suppose that's a good thing if you say so, but it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. How so? Neither of us like wasted effort. And look at all the trouble I put you through. What the hell? Alright, Siam, I'm going to tell you 2 things. First, I'm going to be taking this case. Second, I'm not going to leave anyone alive to know about it. No witnesses, including you. Gunfire and screams echoed from the back of the train. Someone was mercilessly gunning down the passengers who'd fled there for safety. The Liberation Front only sent 2 covert operatives. I brought more. That's who you're hearing going to work back there. And after you risk yourself to protect those people too. You're betraying the front, Siam rasped. It's not betrayal. The Liberation Front was simply a patron to me. I was just doing Sadaka, really. Well, now the fundamentalists have been beaten at their own conflict game, I say it's high time we cut ties. One who believes absolutely in a particular religious doctrine, used here to refer to as Islamic fundamentalists. These include radical anti-American and anti-Israeli factions who have repeatedly come into armed conflict with the Israeli military. The slaughter continued. Several passengers who hadn't managed to flee to the rear of the train still cowered, trembling, and the car was seen would battle the soldiers. A survival that would take an ironic turn when the butchers doing their work farther down the train reached this car.
そのトランクがあれば解放戦線もお前の望み通り物騒になるはずだが。
This doesn't make sense, Seam said. If the Liberation Front gets this bioweapon, they'll become the danger that you've always wanted them to be.
その通り。これがパレスチナ側に渡ればイスラエル側も黙ってはいまい。
Indeed, if I hand this over to the Palestinians, the Israelis won't be able to stand by quietly.
戦力に劣るお前たちは最終的にこいつの封を開けるだろう。
But your side is outgunned, and ultimately you're being forced to break the seal on this thing to even up the
そうなっては
odds.
困る。何しろ米軍にこいつを払い下げさせたのは私だからな。
And I can't have that. After all, I'm the one who prompted the US military to sell it off in the first place. Seam let out a hoarse gasp.
欲しいのはイシャー。それもとびきり物騒なね。しばらくするとこんな噂が流れる。米軍流出の生物兵器が輸送途中にヨルダン国内で襲撃され奪われた。
What I want is rumors, Seneca continued. Dangerous rumors. A biological weapon in the US military was getting rid of, stolen mid-transport in a raid in Jordanian
輸送計
territory.
画はイスラエル強硬派。襲ったのは解放戦争。ウイルスは誰の手に渡った？
Was the transport arranged by Israeli hardliners? Was the raid carried out by the PLO? Who got their hands on the virus?
真実はわからない。だが緊張だけは高まる。
No one will be sure of the truth. Tensions will rise.
欲しいのはそれだけだ。ハルブはよろしくない。こういうおもちゃはきちんと使い方が分かっている人間が管理するものだ。
That's all I'm after. War is never good. A toy like this needs to be reserved for those who know how to use it properly. This was all a political farce, and an especially poor one at that. Neither the side transporting the weapon nor the side attempting to steal it would know where it had gone. Suspicion would beget its suspicion, plunging the Middle East further into chaos.
イスラエル側はこの件を知らないのか。
Do the Israelis not know about this? Seam
ウア
asked.
の試作品の取引は強硬派の独断か。
Was the UA prototype deal some hardliners working independently?
ああ、イスラエル側の総意じゃない。隅に追いやられつつある老人の悪あがきだ。
That's right, the desperate
今から
Flynn.
連中も大慌てだろう。身内が何の相談もせず、自分たちの家に致命的な毒を運び込もうとしているんだ。
That's right, the desperate feeling of some old fools were backed into a corner. Their leaders must be in a mad rush right now, knowing that their own people have been trying to bring some lethal poison into their house without consulting them.
その老人にとっては、これもイスラエルのための善意なんだろうがな。お前の口癖通り、信念というのは実に迷惑だよ。
Of course, for them, all this was for the good of Israel. What was that he always said? Faith could be a real nuisance. Seam felt a dark cloud pass behind his eyes. This operation had been doomed to failure from the start. The Liberation Front had been played like an ode. Key people had been handed the information they wanted, like they wanted it. After that, greed and anticipation had ensured they acted predictably. Seeking only chaos and confusion, the instigator had used one of the oldest tricks in the book, one who controls and dispenses information in order to achieve political or military goals. As skillfully executed agitation can sometimes be more effective than deploying a major force, both military and political organizations around the world regularly employ such methods.
そして俺たちが死ねば解放戦線も奪還に失敗したと判断するか。
So we die, the Liberation Front fails to acquire the weapon, is that the idea? CMS
お
said?
前こそらしくない。そんな必要はないだろう。対立を煽るバカな。今さら第三者が油を注がずともこの地の火は消えん。
There's no need for this. You want to fan the flames of confrontation? Even without the third party pouring on more gas, the fires here aren't going to go out.
そうだな。この程度のコントロールは私が手を下すまでもないんだが、今回は他にも理由があった。
You're right, accomplishing that much wouldn't require my direct intervention, but I have other reasons for getting personally involved in this
ウーア
case.
の管理とお前の始末だ。
Getting control of the UA and getting rid of
お
you.
互い因縁だな、シャム。
Our fates are connected,
お
Siam.
前には2年前、ウーアの実験を阻止できなかった負い目がある。ウーアの輸送が行われるとすれば、必ず食いついてくると分かっていた。
You blame yourself for not stopping the UA experiment 2 years ago. I knew you'd take the bait this time if you knew the UA virus was
と
involved.
なれば、お前を始末できるとしたら、それはもう私ぐらいしかいないだろう。
If anyone was going to be able to get rid of you, it was going to be me,
もっ
right?
とも、お前がここまでふぬけていたとは思わなかったが。
Though I must admit, you're stupider than I gave you credit for.
自社の口封じか。ウーアの存在を隠すのに俺が邪魔になったのか。
So this is all just a scheme to protect your secret, Siam said? And am I obstacle to concealing the existence of the weaponized UA?
ああだが決めたのは今じゃない。私は 初めからお前を始末しようと思っていた。
Yes, so I didn't decide that just now. I'd been thinking about getting rid of you since the very beginning.
初めから俺がウーアを知ったのは2年前。お前とは4年前からの付き合いだが。
The very beginning? I only learned about the UA 2 years ago. We've known each other for 4.
だからさ、お前は私の素性を知っている。生まれとかそんなどうでもいいことじゃない。
True, but you know too much about...
私の癖を知りすぎている。
True, but you know too much about me. Not my birthplace. I don't care about that. You know what kind of soldier I am. Seam stared at Sadaka through a haze of pain. Any secret weapon becomes less effective once its true capabilities are known, and she sees herself as a weapon. She killed me to maintain her effectiveness. Sounds like I underestimated your need for privacy. Privacy, he said. So once you're done with me, Canaan's next.
あれがウーアの生き残りであることも知っている。お前と同じ問題だよ。
She is. I know that she's a UA survivor. She poses the same problem you do. It's not 100% lethality rate. Canaan is a survivor.
致死率 100% だったウイルス兵器の生存者だ。なぜどうして生き残ったのか。生存者分析は貴重なデータになる。
And she survived viral weapon with a 100% lethality rate. Why and how is she still alive? She'll be able to provide some valuable data. When she first arrived on the train, Sadaka had said something cryptic about looking into personnel and looking to a flaw with a weapon. Now it was clear that what she meant was that she wanted to gather information about the UA survivor and how the weapon had affected her. From the start, this job had been about nothing more than getting the most she could out of the UA. So you want to use the virus. You wanted to personally examine the one person who survived it, Steam asked? Is that really all there is to it?
それ以外に理由はない。
That's it, Sadaka
サ
said.
ンプルとして生きたまま捉えたかったが、あれはもういい。少しばかり特殊すぎる。
I'd hope to be able to bring her back as a live specimen, but oh well, she's a little too exceptional.
扱いやすいサンプルとは言えないし。
She wouldn't make for a very convenient
憎しみ
sample.
に駆られて、今頃は無駄死にだ。
She's too caught up in hatred, and now she's going to die in vain.
後部車両の処理完了しました。こちらの処理が済み次第撤退の準備を。
Sadaka's radio crackled to life. The rear section is now secured, a masculine voice declared. Should we prepare to withdraw once we're done with cleanup?
機関部の同志との合流が遅れている。ヘリに連絡は入れておけ。
Negative, hold off on that for now. Our people in the forward section are late for the rendezvous. Contact the helicopter and let them know. The sound of gunfire told them of more passengers being cut down. Helicopter, Sam croaked.
何しろ、この列車は時期脱線するからな。その後歩いて帰るわけにもいかんだろう。イスラエル側も無能じゃない。撤収は早いだけいい。
That's right, this train's going to be derailed. I'm sure don't plan on walking home. The Israelis aren't incompetent. I plan on getting out of here as fast as I can. She'd been very thorough. In all likelihood, she planted explosives further along the track. It would have been much simpler than tampering with the train directly. A crash not be completely destroy the train, but it would be enough to eliminate any remaining passengers. If the engine wasn't stopped before it was derailed, there would be no hope of saving anyone who remained alive on board. So anyone at all involved with UA, the people who helped... Goddamn. Still talking. So anyone at all involved with the UA, the people who helped you steal it, even anyone who happened to be on board this train, they're all going to die. Thorough if a bit excessive, Sim said. But can you actually pull it off?
まさか、あの小娘に期待しているのか?
Tell me you're still counting on your little girl. Sadaka sneered. It was a crueler, colder expression than any Sim had ever seen before.
少しは見込みがあると思ったが、あんなのは論外だ。ウーアへの憎しみで我をなくし、自らの性能を誤った。
She's of no use to me. I thought she might have some promise at first, but her hatred of the virus had made her lose control of herself. It's compromised her abilities.
お前の手腕も地に落ちたな。
It's disappointing, really. All of your efforts wasted. That's where you're wrong, Sim said. He was dying, but his voice was firm. In the back of his mind, there was a whisper. Sadaka had sent some of her men to the engine compartment. Why hadn't they returned?
何が言いたい、シャム。
What are you trying to say, Sim? Nothing's...
恐怖を知っている者は憎しみでは動かない。
Nothing special, just the obvious. People who know fear don't act out of hatred.
お前や俺とは違う。
Canaan, she's not like you or me. Now she's worried. The chill between them became acute. She lifted up her gun, taking aim at Seem's forehead. Her expression said it all. This man before her had fallen from grace, and her disappointment had turned deadly.
断っておくが、私はお前を同胞とは思っていない。
Let me just make one thing clear. I'm not like you, she
そ
said.
れが正しい。なぜ
You're
なら
right.
お前は
You're right, because you know what you are? For one fleeting moment, their own connection was renewed. He spoke. She listened, saying nothing as she had often done so long ago.
気が変わった。
I've changed my mind, Seneca said. I think I am going to finish you off.
なぜ初めから頭を打たなかった？
Why didn't you just shoot me in the head to begin with?
ジンクスだよ。
Because of the jinx.
今までお前は何度も被弾したが、
You've been shot so many
不思議
times.
とただの一度も頭に当たったことはなかっただろう。
Yet by some miracle, you've never taken a bullet to the head. Her voice was hollow as if she already put this all to an end. She raised her
君
gun.
でも何でもない。頭を打たれなかったからこうして生きている。俺もお前もただの兵士だからな。
It's not a miracle, he said. Not getting shot in the head is just why I'm still alive. You and I are both just ordinary soldiers.
知ってる。
I know that, Seneca
け
replied.
どまあ、私にとってそういうイメージだったんだ。お前は。
It's just, well, it's just this image I have of you. That's all. What she said! Canaan came charging from the adjacent car. In the heat of her fury, she fired wildly, but still managed to knock the gun from Seneca's hand. Seneca instantly retreated. She sensed instinctively to her chagrin that she couldn't defeat her young rival now. Under the circumstances, this was prey she wasn't ready to hunt. Seneca clicked her tongue, dismayed at being outfaced by such an impulsive attack. The girl had been so calm and collected before. Somehow she'd been transformed into a creature of pure emotion, a warrior undefeated and clearly beyond Seneca's capabilities. She's a fucking badass. The scent shifted. She heard sharp footsteps. She spun around, ready to fire a gun. There was a rustling of clothes, and a new sensation crashed against her skin. A volley of bullets whizzed right past her face. But how? A chill ran down her spine. There were enemies other than soldiers on board this train. This one was dressed as a train engineer. Shaking off her premonition of disaster, she pursued this new foe as she retreated toward the front of the train. Right now, she needed to stop the engine. She followed the enemy who shot at her all the way into the driver's cab. Whoever the fake engineer was, he was defiant to the last, finally collapsing without a word. Looking around the cab, Canaan saw the murdered bodies of the real engineers, as well as a smashed control panel, which was now clearly useless. If this guy was wrecking the train, Canaan thought, he must not have been in league with the soldiers protecting it. As if there was some third party that they hadn't been aware of, Canaan broke into a sprint. If she had been a better understanding of how the train functioned, she might have found some way to stop it by force by destroying something in the engine room. She had no time to ponder such things now. Her instincts spurred into motion. The priorities of the situation had changed. As she raced back toward where she left Seem and Seneca, she reflected that she hadn't liked this job from the start. Something about this train just felt wrong, and its modern colors had boded ill from this beginning. Sam! She ran as fast as she could. The sight of her previous battle and everything beyond reeked of the thick stench of death. Her dread of what she would find was almost overwhelming as she headed into the compartment that held the second group of soldiers. All at once she saw pure, excruciating red. What she said. Violent emotion surged through her as she cut loose with a wild barrage. It was the first time since she first picked up a gun that she fired without certainty that she'd hit her mark. The bullets found their marks, and several of Seneca's men fell dead, but how many moments had this brought Siam? Seneca had vanished toward the rear of the train, carrying the case with her. Canaan didn't even consider following her. Instead, dumbstruck, she dropped to her knees beside her mentor. Her mind couldn't process the situation. Just like a newly hatched chick, Siam told her with the faintest of smiles.
Canaan.
What he said. No. She shook her head, not wanting to hear what he would say. I've taken my death wound, you could see that. His voice was calm. She stared at him, silently pleading. No, she kept shaking her head slowly, inwardly imploring him not to die, but unable to put her plea into words. Seem stirred. His consciousness was fading from blood loss, but the face before him was one he recognized. He shook himself back to awareness, recalling the young girl he found 2 years before. The memory hardly seemed real. Those days of mundane, everyday life hadn't really been his to live. Canaan, you need to accept this. No, I can't. I won't. She knelt, still shaking her head as Siam calmly told her what had happened. Sadaka had betrayed them. She had stabbed him and stolen the case with the bioweapon. The train would soon be derailed and destroyed. The train crew and passengers had been murdered, though there might still be a few alive. They'd failed miserably, and the situation was only getting worse. Sadaka was getting away. I don't care about Sadaka, Canaan wailed. We need to get you medical attention. If we can just stop the bleeding, we can still... That'd be a waste of time. There are other things you need to do. Open your eyes, Canaan. There was nothing special about this. Me and her were soldiers, nothing more. Soldiers toss away their humanity. Soldiers get shot. Did I ever teach you to seek some meaning in that? No, you're wrong. You're not like her, Siam. I don't know what she's like, but I don't want to know. But you're different. You're a good person. Maybe it can be cold, but you're not a monster like her. He had no response to that. Wasn't he a monster? Well, perhaps not. He had recovered enough emotion to feel guilt of what she said, at least. Though that hardly made him human. Need to focus, Canaan. Assess the situation and form a plan of action. Remember, our job is to get that case back, stop this train, and eradicate the UA virus. It wasn't fair. He knew how to press her buttons. Eradicate the UA virus. The very words that would transform Canaan from girl to soldier. Canaan, tell me, what happened at the head of the train? I took down all the guards. The engineer was one of the woman's companions, and he wrecked the control panel, so now we can't use it to stop the train. We'll have to destroy the engine room itself, or maybe use the brakes on each of the individual cards. Were there any other survivors? One's dead. Nobody ahead of the secure freight car. The only ones alive are you and me. Good, I'll stop the train, you go after her, no discussion. Canaan held her breath. Leaving Siam here, wounded as he was tantamounting to letting him die. And why should he worry about stopping the train when they were the only passengers still alive? Canaan couldn't imagine leaving him to spending his final moments alone. Canaan, look around. How many survivors? His soldier's edge whipped away her sentimentality. Tell me, Canaan, how many are there? She lifted her downcast eyes. In all their time together, she had never once relied on her exceptional nature. She had never shunned her from being different, always accepted her together with her curse, her gift. Now he needed her help. There are 3, she said, gazing around reading the colors of the fallen. Only 3 people alive. Only 3? Yes, only 3. Amidst the sea of blood that surrounding them, 3 of the passengers still clung to life. Yes, that's right, she said. She doubted they had any chance of survival. Even with medical care, probably none of them would make it. But that wasn't how Siam saw things or how he wanted her to see it. No, she corrected herself. There are 3 whole people we can save. At that he nodded, and maybe just a little he smiled. I'll handle the
連
train.
結を外しブレーキをかける程度だ。この体でも十分に現実的な役割だ。
I'll undo the coupling so that we are able to apply the brakes. I'm pretty sure I've still got enough strength to pull that off.
お前の方は少し骨だぞ。
Your job is going to be a bit more difficult.
でもすぐ戻る。
I know, but I'll be right back. Her voice, her emotions under control at last. She was the consummate warrior now, just like he'd trained her to be.
カナン、
What he
お前
said.
は戦争によって過去を奪われた犠牲者であり、奴は権力闘争によって過去を失った敗北者だ。
You were victimized, your past stolen from you by war. She was defeated, her past swallowed up by power struggles beyond her
兵士とし
control.
ての起点は同じだが、あり方は異なっている。
Your paths as warriors began in similar places, but you have walked them in different ways. Seam's gun slipped from his hands. It seemed in the moment like a symbol of his life, a hard and deadly weapon, a killer of many ways now abandoned.
破壊によって生まれた兵士は憎しみを武器とする。
Soldiers born of destruction make hatred into a weapon,
俺と
Seam
奴
said.
のうつろさは、単にそれに焼き尽くされただけの話だ。
That's what made her and me so empty inside. The hatred just burns inside until all of us else is
その
burned out.
話を覚えているか？
Do you remember what I told you?
覚えてる。憎しみには
I do. You said that hatred must never be used as a means of fighting back. Even if the power it gave you let you destroy your opponent, if you cultivated such power, it would destroy you too in the end. Well done, he thought. Perhaps he really had managed to pass on all that he could. His lips curled into the ghost of a smile. He once said that death was the great equalizer, that it came the same for everyone, no matter who they were. Now Seam's time had come, and Canaan realized with a sudden surprising calm that she'd accepted it.
最後のタリウムだ。
My last request, he said.
奴を逃がすな。より多くの命を救い。
Don't let Sadaka get away, and save whatever lives you can.
シャムも元気で。
Yes, good fortune to you, Siam. There was no grieving. They simply parted ways, each reflecting on the past 2 years and needing nothing more than that. Siam smiling. Aww. Gosh, this is still going. Oh my gosh. Sadaka stood atop the train. The scenery, a uniform brown for much of the journey, was now dotted with green in places. They were drawing close to their destination, and the destination she had chosen. Very shortly, the train's usefulness would come to an end. They were less than 2 minutes to go before the rendezvous with the Black Hawk, an assault helicopter manufactured by Sikorsky Aircraft, first saw combat with the U.S. Army during the invasion of Grenada in 1983, and in more recent years has seen service in the Iraq War. It is used by over 20 nation-states, including Japan, Australia, Egypt, and Israel. Sadaka carried the case in her left hand, handcuffed to her wrist, and gripped her gun with her right. The FN-57, a semi-automatic pistol produced by Belgian manufacturer FN Herstal, used 5.7 times 28mm cartridge with high penetration power, typically sold only to law enforcement and military agencies. However, there are less powerful versions that have been made available to the civilian market. The preparation hasn't been flawless. The helicopter pilot was highly skilled. He would lower a ladder to her at her position, and she would simply ride it right on up. She accomplished most of what she wanted, and now her retreat would be swift. She should have been wholly pleased with the situation, yet she was wholly dissatisfied. Of course, that would have been the case regardless of the results she had obtained. It was not in her nature to ever be content. Only by striking out at the world around her could she ever keep herself sane. And now, her thirst for vengeance was worse than ever.
そりゃ来るよな。
Ah, and here she comes. A girlish silhouette appeared on the roof of the train not far away, and Sadaka felt her thirst change to hunger.
さあ、愉快な狩りの始ま
Time
り
to
だ。
go hunting. She more than had the upper hand here. If she were to go down, the case would fall down with her. And if the case were damaged, the UA virus would very likely be released. Which meant that the little lady couldn't shoot at her until she got the case away, whereas Sadaka was free to unload on her as much as she would wanted. The kill was certain to be hers. How could she help but smile? She saw the UA, stirred by both sides in international conflict, and would soon eliminate the last witness to her scheme. It had been quite some time since she'd last scored such a coup.
ああ、それだけは感謝してもいい。
I suppose I owe this little lady a little thanks for contributing to my success. Her target was 3 cars away. Knowing her pistol's effective range, Sadaka gave herself an 80% chance of hitting. If Canaan had been 1 car closer, it would have been 100%. And since it wasn't like the girl could fly, she had no hope of escaping certain death. Sadaka aimed at the train car's roof just in front of Canaan's feet. Time for a little intimidation. Let's show this upstart what real skill looks like. She needs to understand that a step closer to me is a step into certain death.
どこまで踊れるかな、お嬢さん。
Alright, little lady, let's see how well you dance. Seeing him struggle to his feet, he had a final job to do. There were 6 meters and a door between him and the coupling that linked this car to the next, easily enough under ordinary circumstances. Once he undid the coupling, the automatic air brake would kick in and stop the rear section of the train. A style of brake used by railway cars that utilizes air pressure. All of the train cars included sections of a brake pipe, linked to each other down to the center of the train's undercarriage. The brakes in the car are structured so that they are active when air is removed from the pipe. If 2 cars become separated, this releases the air, causing the brakes to kick in automatically. The distance seemed vast. How much time was it going to take him to do something as simple as waking up in the morning and washing his face? It was altogether too long and treacherous a journey that would use up all of the remaining of his life. So they still haven't disappeared on me. Muddied memories played in his mind like scenes from an old movie. There was a time when I saw hope in a girl who made nihilism his reason to live. After that, I found hope in another girl's weakness as she clung to her desire to live. The hope Sadaka brought her had been like opium, a drug he took to coax himself into thinking his actions were for the best. Somehow at the time he never realized his mistake. And then there was Canaan, a victim of war. She'd given him a kind of hope that brought all his own pain sharply into focus. Even at death's door, she thought nothing of dying, even only wanting to live a life of meaning. He had no doubt now which kind of hope was the better one, but he still remembered both, just as he remembered the faith that he'd driven him long before he met either girl. That was decades ago now. How naive he'd been, an unsophisticated firebrand clinging to blind belief. 3 wounded passengers, 3 people to save. The thought drove him on. 2 years earlier, he'd been unable to save anyone. He had been nothing but a killer. Did that make him a hypocrite now? Perhaps, but if so, for one he could accept his own hypocrisy. Siam blinked. His eyesight was failing. Maybe it was the light of truth that had blinded him. He was paying at last for the sin of casting aside his beliefs so long ago. Did he have the stamina to keep going? Of course he did. He trained himself to find new reserves of strength when it mattered most. War was always like this. After the mind and body had given out, a true soldier could forge onward on spirit alone, like a servant of the dead. It had been a long time since he'd taken the job that tipped the scales back toward the living. Of course, he'd always told himself that he killed so that he and others might live. Mercy and slaughter stemmed from the same behavioral principle, the struggle for self-preservation. Still, a soldier's deeds seemed to slip inevitably toward the negative end of the spectrum. He remembered how the long slide had started, the motives that had driven him to take up arms and pushed him further and further into the void. I will lose my life now. I will lose this emptiness. At long last, my balance will return to 0. Another memory. Before they'd boarded the train, the girl had begged him for a special boon, just when that had happened exactly. That is so true about tattoos. You're such a liar, Siam. You said it wasn't going to hurt at all. I had no idea it was going to be this painful. Perhaps at the time, Siam had simply forgotten how painful it was. He'd been good at that, after all. He asked her if the pain from her new tattoo would impair her for the upcoming job, and she shook her head. I mean, yeah, it does hurt, Canaan said. But it makes me happy, and that makes me better at what I do. The girl's skills really did change based on her emotions. Her good moods were rare, but when she was happy, her abilities were remarkable indeed. A tattoo was a small price to pay for that. This girl was quite probably the strangest person he'd ever known. Meeting her was an honor for him in a way. Even when her timing made her into a soldier, training made her into a soldier, she never truly let go of her feelings. Maybe she'd been a free spirit the whole time, or maybe her feelings are what helped her through in part. It didn't matter which it was. Hey, Mrs. Bean. This shows that we're family, Siam. For as long as I have it, I'll never forget what you taught me. Remembering it now, he felt a vague sense of fulfillment. For a monster, he'd done a pretty good job. How did you accidentally? Well, got the break. The final showdown, though. Oh. Well, that's not really accidental now, is it? The 2 girls stood 30 meters apart. Canaan had stopped her advance just as the edge of the 3rd car. Sadako waited, silent. Her rival could never hit her from there. Canaan took one more step. One more and the real fun would start. The curtain had risen on the final act of the drama. The violent drone of a helicopter sounded in the distance. In a matter of moments, the chopper would arrive. Lowering the ladder, Sadako would then ascend in triumph. What are you waiting for? She called out. Don't tell me you came up here just to watch me go. I thought you were sworn to destroy the virus. Her challenge was a hiss upon the wind. Cannon glared. She knew she could reach her enemy in 5 seconds or less, but Sadako would need only one of those seconds to aim and fire. Cannon would be killed 5 times over if she charged. It was a risk she couldn't afford to take. She couldn't hope to win, not under these conditions. You really think I'd let you go? Cannon called back. Don't be a fool. Sadaka's taunt had stung her nerves. Her rival's voice was like a jagged claw, a filthy talon scratching at her temples. Cannon grounded her teeth in frustration. She had no fear of charging in without a plan, but that wasn't going to work this time. That would give too much of an edge to her opponent. No, you don't need to. Just don't do it again. This is such a letdown, Sadaka said. But no matter, whatever you do, I'll be able to put the contents of this case to good use. Did you know, young lady, that this UA is a flawed weapon? More a negotiation tool than anything I'd actually use. But why is that? You ask because it's too powerful. The ladder swayed down from the helicopter above. Sadako could make her escape in a moment if she chose. Yet she hesitated, savoring Cannon's defeat. The fact is, it's too early to use the virus as a weapon, she said. It'll take the world's top researchers 2 years at least to fully understand what they're up against. Then the UA will have some real value in my catalog. A pity you... A pity you won't be there to see that. Your deaths here are really going to accomplish nothing. But don't worry, I'll make sure the UA reaches its full potential. No one may care that it took your parents from you, but one day this weapon will make a grand name for itself. And then I'm going to make a killing. Cannon fought back a wave of nausea. Ferocious colors danced before her eyes. Bark all you want, she said. It's not going to happen. She heard a dull clang from somewhere ahead and felt a faint shudder through her feet. The train began to slow. Strength filled her limbs. She shifted her posture, ready to spring into action. I guess I didn't need to provoke you, Sadaka sneered. She could see it in Cannon's eyes. The girl was ready to run right into her death. Everything was falling into place. The bleak scenery was opening out into a fertile landscape. Cannon was about to die. One step forward, and there would be a resounding gunshot. But instead of moving, Cannon spoke. Your name, what is it really? Sadaka smiled inwardly, so that's what's been gnawing at her. Alphard, she said. This is the Alphard that we know in the game. Seemed what wanted his promised land, but all he was able to make me into was just another terrorist. At her words, the race began. Huh? Sadaka Alphard stared in surprise. The instant that she realized that her first shot had missed, she pulled the trigger again. This time her eyes went wide with shock. How could I miss at this range? The red-clad figure sped along the train car roof, zigzagging as she moved like a bolt of lightning. On she came, heedless of the death in the air around her. There was no doubt about it. The girl was dodging bullets. For a master markswoman like Alphard, it was a nightmare come to life. No, this is ridiculous. It can't be. What Cannon was doing simply shouldn't be possible. Just before each shot, she would change her trajectory unpredictably, shifting out of the bullet's path. Evasive movement was a standard tactic, but knowing precisely when and where to dodge, that required an inhuman ability to predict the future. It's like she could practically see the bullets. That simply wasn't possible, was it? Alphard's mind raced. She fought a rising wave of panic. The girl had almost reached her now. But Alphard still held one advantage, the case in her left hand. The girl would have to go for the case before attacking her directly. Alphard would just have to kill her before that. It was simple, just pull the trigger, and yet, she began to doubt that she could hit Cannon. She struggled to comprehend what she was up against, her mind recoiling as she began to understand the full extent of this demon's powers.
私が見ているのは
You don't really think I could see the bullets, do you? Her voice was like the whispers of the devil himself, speaking what was in Alphard's mind. She fixed her opponent with a victorious stare.
だだろう私が見たのは
I see your hatred. She could see my emotions? Of course, this girl could discern emotions like they were colors. She wasn't looking at the bullets or even at Alphard's movements. She was reading her enemy's expectations. She could tell exactly when Alphard believed that she would hit her mark, exactly when she would fire. That was precisely when she dodged aside. So long as a foe had human emotions, this girl could predict what that foe would do in an instant before it happened. Ah. This was it. Canaan was all confident. She was closing in for the kill.
私も
Of course Alphard left. The only way to ruin her enemy's predictions was to do something wholly unpredictable. Huh? As Alphard hurled the case in the train, Canaan instinctively launched after it. Realizing she'd been baited even as she was tumbling through the air, Canaan clutched the chase to her chest and rolled to her face her foe, reflexively bringing her gun to bear. Bullets whizzed in both directions. For an instant, the two combatants seemed suspended in a kind of distorted balance, two natural opposites in opposition. One who could sense emotions and one who could eliminate them. By all rights, they should have been evenly matched, but Canaan's own emotions tipped the scale in her favor. Alphard let herself get too drawn in, so she had forced herself to swallow her hatred for a moment and fired at the girl as if a simple obstacle. She would find a color of determination that Canaan could not see. Yet, even those shots failed to strike home. Even with her hatred suppressed, her intentions could be read. She would need to discard her hate to divorce even her will to win from her actions. Only then would she be able to slay the super person. But the girl's bullets also failed to hit. Twisting through the air, fighting to keep hold of the case, she couldn't aim with perfect accuracy. Throwing away the bioweapon had been a split-second decision on Alphard's part. She hadn't spared an iota of consideration for the thousands who might die if the case broke open. Canaan trembled as an evil chill ran down her spine at the sight of Alphard standing on the train. There she saw not another woman, but an angel of death, an organic destruction made flesh. Damn. Alphard is ruthless. Cute, but ruthless. She rolled as she struck the ground, safeguarding the case with her body. The impact scattered her senses. She struggled to remain conscious as she bounced along, focusing on protecting her precious burden. If it broke open now, everything she and Seam had done would be for nothing. At last she slid to a stop and lay there, panting with exertion. She checked the case before she checked herself for injuries. I did it. The case was intact. The next, following standard protocol, she began assessing